when it got to the breaking point, I started realizing, or just kind of started like, it's like, hey, something's got to give. I'm drinking way too much. I'm like, I can't do this. Like, I can't go back like this. And, you know, I was having like really bad suicidal ideations, and just, I needed something. And I knew that the route that I was going on with drinking and with everything that I'd been through, and, you know, everything that I was currently going through, like, I couldn't do it anymore. I needed.
This episode's guest is Ryan Pass, father, husband, and Marine Corps veteran. I think what you'll hear most when you listen to Ryan's story is his perseverance, which was evident at an early age, his parents' divorce, challenges he faced trying to get through high school so that he could join after 9/11. Even after joining, the emotional toll and the guilt of surviving multiple combat deployments to Iraq and Afghanistan, even though his friends didn't, all the way through his medical diagnosis that ultimately ended his time in service in the Marine Corps. There's a lot packed into this episode. You're going to want to listen to it all, trust me. First, we're going to start in the kitchen by making a meal together. This is one of Ryan's favorites, chicken tortilla soup. So go ahead and join us in the kitchen and see how this thing comes together. It's going to be a good one. Everyone's got a story, but this one's Ryan's. All right, man. So what are we making today?
Chicken tortilla soup.
Chicken tortilla soup. Okay. Yeah. All right. So with that, what are we doing first?
So first, probably go ahead and start the Instapot so we can start getting the black beans going.
Okay.
Just because it's gonna take a little more time, I think, than some of it. So, and then we'll roll into everything else.
So I mentioned earlier. So I don't want to say I'm nervous about using Instapot. But if I said I wasn't nervous, it would be a lie.
Yeah.
just the idea, right? You're pressurizing. You're doing something. So, you know, the couple of times that I've actually used this thing, I think I read the manual like, I don't know, 6 or 7 times, and then each step I have it like next to the Instapot to make sure I'm not going to blow something through the roof, because that's I think worst case scenario. So as soon as I start doing something, all right. So salt, bay leaves, black beans, water.
Yep, it should be ready to go.
We're just okay.
Yep. So it's funny too, because like you said, I for whatever reason never even realized it, but I remember growing up, whenever we would make refried beans, there was always a you know, we always had a pressure pot on the stove. So,
right.
So but I never really thought about them blowing up until actually, I think my rounds in Iraq and stuff. And it's like, wait a minute. But
this could go horribly wrong in a matter of a split second.
Yep.
All right, so 25 minutes on the beans. That's going to do its thing. What are we doing in between?
So next we'll go ahead and start prepping the chicken.
Okay.
And then we can probably start cutting up some of the ingredients and kind of getting those ready.
All right, so I'll get to work on the ingredients.
So yeah, I'll start by putting just a little bit of splash of olive oil. That's the other thing. Most of my cooking is typically just kind of by sight.
Right.
Heart feel is what my wife calls it.
Yeah. We're using this whole onion or?
We'll probably use about half of it.
Okay. And do you want it diced, rough chopped, diced?
Diced.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So beans are going. I can hear them next to me. You put me in the danger zone next to the actual pressure pot because I can hear it going as I'm going to be cutting up these onions and prepping the rest of this food. But so chicken tortilla soup, you know, kind of gave you the heads up, you know, a little bit ago saying, hey, just let me know what you want to make, and you know, we'll kind of figure it out from there. But why was chicken tortilla soup one of the options? What's the backstory for you guys?
So I do a couple of things pretty well, or at least it's seeming well. My neighbors and my kids seem to love it, and then this one was like I said, it was something I used to make in the barracks all the time when I was still in, and
right.
It was a huge hit amongst the other single Marines. They were always, when they would always come over to my room asking for some. So,
okay. And
I always had plenty. So we would sit around and kind of hang out and eat tortilla soup. So it was just kind of like one of those things.
Was the what about Jackie? Is this a good meal that you would cook for her, or is she just like, just whatever?
Oh no, she
asked for it?
Yeah, she likes it, but it's usually when it's cold out. So that was actually the options that I had thrown out there were soups, and it was just because it was nice and cold, and yeah, I figured I'd throw those out there. So it was actually kind of interesting that you rolled with this one, because this one actually probably has more meaning than any of the other ones, because those are just ones we eat when it's cold.
Right.
But yeah, like I said, there's a little more history behind this one as far as like it was. I was kind of known around the barracks for this one.
I'm doing 3 cloves. I don't know if you said you wanted 3 cloves,
Yep.
but you gave me 3 cloves, so I think
Yes,
that's
sir.
what. All right, is that chopped up enough?
Yes,
You need
sir.
it more.
Yep. So that's good. So we'll throw that in there with the bacon grease. So I think I said before, so I put a little bit of olive oil in there.
Yep.
And then I throw bacon grease. I cook a lot with bacon grease.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just something growing up we always did. So, yep. So that's what we'll do. So we'll throw that in there.
Okay.
We'll saute that just a little bit
Get
before
the
we throw the
onions in
chicken
there
in.
first,
Yes, sir.
and then we'll
Aromatics is what my wife calls them. So,
come back to the garlic a little bit in a couple minutes. So you said bacon grease growing up, and I had a lot of bacon as a kid. I don't know what the what the thing was, but one of the things I always remember is my dad saving all the bacon grease. And we had like these little mason jars that he would always keep around. He would just dump it in the mason
Yep.
jars, and it would just stay in the refrigerator until he had to use
ready
it.
to go.
Yeah. So checking on this Instapot, it's not supposed to tell us the time left. It's just supposed to say,
yeah. So what it'll do is it'll actually they'll when it's ready, it'll beep, and then when it's time to beep, then you have to off gas it and let it. That's always a fun part. So
I'll be over there. I'll be over there when that happens.
I've been blowing up a couple of times. I don't think.
Yeah. Black beans don't scare you, is what you're telling me.
Or it'll be the one thing that takes me out after surviving all the other ones. So
Never consider black bean as an enemy, but
yeah,
today may be a different day.
yeah.
We'll see. So, you talked about making this in the barracks, and were you cooking a lot before that? Was that something you got into after you joined the Marine Corps? Like, what got you into cooking, I guess, or when did you start getting into cooking?
So I think part of it was a survival measure, and I say that like wholeheartedly. I know my mom will agree when she watches this.
Yeah.
My mom was not a great cook.
Okay. Sorry, Mom.
Yeah, and we used to have a joke, but it was actually, I mean, as much of a joke it really was serious. Like whenever you heard the smoke detector going off, you knew dinner was done.
So those were the real black cookies. That were
Yeah. But so and then as we got older, we started doing like my mom called it every man for himself night. So we would start making our own meals, or we would cook, like we would rotate through and make meals for the family. So which kind of set us up, and we actually started trying to implement with that with our kids, because I think it was accidental with us, but it was just kind of like, you know what, like we walked away like as adults knowing how to cook some. So it was something we pass on to the kids. So every now and then we'll make them cook for us. So my stepson lives with us. So we his favorite thing is it's basically a made from scratch version of Hamburger Helper.
Okay.
So shells and cheese, or shells as my daughter likes to call it. So
was there anybody else that was, that you remember growing up maybe that would have been or was a bigger influence for you food-wise, or were you just kind of left early to just kind of figure it out and just kind of go from there?
So my godmother, we call her Nina. She actually was a cook. So she was like your stay-at-home mom, and kind of coming into that, like it was kind of interesting because she would make homemade from scratch meals and stuff like that. Like I was talking about earlier about always being because we ate a lot at her house, if you can imagine. We live like 2 doors down from her, so it was kind of nice. Her and my cousins, so we'd eat a lot there. But she always made like from scratch meals, and like I said, like there was always like a pressure pot on the thing.
Yeah,
with, like,
that's where that came from.
Yeah.
Okay. So what were some of the things that I know you talked about the pressure pot, but was there specific things that you remember that stood out to you that maybe you made with her, or that she was serving you when you were younger?
Not that I can remember. I mean, I know obviously we had like I'm trying to think. So we did a lot of spaghetti in the house, and mashed potatoes was another big thing, especially during like holidays like Thanksgiving or Christmas meals.
Right.
But we had a lot of Hispanic food, but it was mainly like, I say that, but it's like pretty typical, almost like an Americanized version of it. We're a little far removed from our roots, I guess you could say, because my grandmother, when she came over to the States, which is actually kind of a crazy story about her family, but growing up, so she was like the first generation of that side of the family that was born in the U.S. So they used to get punished for speaking Spanish. So she pretty much vowed that she wasn't going to teach her kids how to speak Spanish. So it was like one of those things where they didn't know it, they didn't speak it, and then, but she was still fluent in it. So it was kind of,
wow.
As we were getting older, she would speak it to us, and it was kind of, so it was one of those things where I would try to learn. I kind of spoke a little bit of Spanglish growing up, and then, but yeah, so that was kind of how that was. But the interesting story, though, like I was saying, though, this is kind of a wild story as far as like our roots. So my great grandfather was he was a bandito. He used to roll with Poncho.
Oh my goodness!
And like as a kid, he would deliver packages. Like that was like as like a little kid, he would deliver packages to places, and those places would blow up. But he had,
I'm seeing a theme that's going along with this session. We're talking about the pressure prop blowing up. Now we're Poncho Villa connections.
Yeah. So so he was riding with him, and I guess one day he ran into my great grandmother, and she was from a well-off family, and so she had like her escorts and stuff like that. Like I think it was like some sort of government official. Her dad was, but he decided he wanted her, so he basically set up an ambush, murdered her escorts, kidnapped her, and took her to the States. So and then they had like 15 kids, but they were married until they passed away in their 70s.
What was the rough time frame of this?
So it would have been probably early 1900s, I would imagine. I think it was shortly before. I think Poncho Villa may have still been alive at the time.
Yeah.
So it was before his assassination, but probably not by much.
Yeah. I'm not up on my Poncho Villa facts.
Yeah.
In timeline, the fact that you even told me he was assassinated was news to me.
Yeah.
Although it's old news. News to me. All right, so I've been kind of just messing around with the corn. I wasn't even talking about it, but 4 ears of corn. Didn't cut myself. Cut all the corn kernels off. So we got those sitting there. And then I didn't even ask how you wanted this cooked. I was just kind of slicing
we can just dice it, slice it, however. Yeah. So.
Are you a make sure you keep as much seeds in there as possible guy, or just?
Yeah, I usually try to keep the seeds just for the heat.
Okay.
But I like hot food, so.
Okay. So you did ask me off camera if I liked heat. I don't know if I like all of that.
Okay. Yeah. We can. Okay? Yeah, we can do it down to your taste. So okay. I eat really, really spicy sometimes. So yeah.
Whatever you need, little boy. Whatever you need, we can make it whatever.
But I don't want it inedible for you, so.
I appreciate that.
Because that was actually, I don't know if, like with the whole chili thing. So I did a couple chili cook-offs with the at work, and I won one of them for hottest. But
this was recent.
Yeah, it was. Well, yeah, this was probably about a year ago now. But I made it one more time just recently for just like just a chili thing. But I'll put like Carolina Reaper in it. It's got like it's spicy. It's really spicy.
You're not messing around.
Yeah.
Okay.
So.
All right. Well, maybe I'll cut these without you looking it out.
So we can do it to your taste. So and then I'll eat either way. So way. So.
And this pot just made a bunch of noise.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's stopped me in my tracks mid-thought. Yeah, as soon as I hear noise coming over here from the left side from this pot, I'm not even thinking about what I was talking about. I don't know how long it's been on. Probably close to 20 minutes by now. 25 minutes.
So
one more.
Yeah, we could do that, and then maybe you could even if you want to, we can kind of test it, and then maybe even have some set off to the side if we want to sprinkle some as a topping.
I like that. I like the crunch that you would get. From the fresh jalapeno. Okay, how's the chicken looking over there?
Looks like it's going now. I added when you were talking, I added some stock to it.
Okay.
I'm gonna start doing its boil now, and then so we can get it ready to pull.
What type of stock did you add?
I just added the Swanson's chicken stock.
Okay.
Yeah, so chicken stock or chicken broth is a little more hearty. I kind of like those, and my wife again too. My wife's trying to basically get us ready for homesteading. I guess we're looking into maybe considering that. So she's kind of reverting back to a lot of like old traditional stuff. Like we make our own butter. We get raw milk, so we'll do raw milk, and then we'll make butter from the heavy cream we skim. On top of like obviously grinding our own flour.
Yeah.
And the she makes her own bone broth as well. So, and then same thing with the tallow. Like when we get our orders of beef, we usually the guy that owns the ranch there, it's another like family owned ranch out of, I think they're out of Front Royal. I think it's called Cottonwood Ranch. Good people. Like, he comes, he delivers it himself, and it's like, hey, we got extra, X, Y, and Z if you want it. So we usually do that, and we'll get extra fat or bones for soup and stuff like that, and we'll make our own bone broth. And and then same thing with chicken. We'll get roasters to roast, and we'll roast it. And after we get done roasting it, we'll boil down the bones and everything like that, crack them open, and just boil it and keep boiling it till we get bone broth. So
you guys, there's a lot to unpack there. There's a lot of interesting, interesting questions that pop my mind. And you've obviously, I've known a little bit of this from some of the conversations we've had, over the last year plus. The full-on homesteading aspect, very interested in just kind of, the thought process of how you got there. But before you get into that, so you're making all this, using every piece of whatever animal that you're using, especially the ones you were talking about with the beef. Are you then just freezing and storing it until you need it? Or are you giving it away? What are you guys doing with all that?
Yeah, so we'll usually either freeze it or store it. The bone broth and stuff like that, we can it. We just can it and keep it in our storage in the basement, and then just grab it as we need it. So
paint me a picture of the basement. Is this like a
prepper's basement?
Yeah, exactly. It's like apocalyptic prep. I mean, is there shelves everywhere? Like, what is?
So you would almost think that, just because we have the finished basement, and then we have like this unfinished area, and that's kind of where we keep everything for now. But like we've got my wife's got like her planter table. We got like UV lights for like growing and stuff like that. And then we have we'll have our buckets of like wheat berries and stuff like that she's been she's super into it. So she's always constantly like just watching these homesteaders and how they do it. So she's kind of like setting up some of that stuff. But you got that in one corner, and then you've got one of my 2 workbenches that I have for building guns, and it's just littered with like gun parts and like.
So one side of the basement is like
presses
canned foods, and then gun parts on the other.
Yeah, and ammo presses and gunpowder, and so.
That's awesome. So let's say there's 5,000 can goods down there. Mm-hmm. Which one is the most of? You have the most of stock. You have the most of this. Like, what do you guys have the most of that you usually go towards?
I think usually we try to keep more dry goods. I think like our wheat stuff. So our wheat, salt. I think that's pretty much what we have mostly. So down there, but and then we'll have like some canned goods and some stuff that my wife cans. She wants to start figuring out how to can meat, because you can can meat and store it in your fridge, or store it like unrefrigerated for like, I think it's like 6 months or something like that without and it's still good
without drying it out, like drying it yourself. No,
wow. So we're gonna look into that. I'm still a little skeptical, because it's kind of like but I mean,
I kept a straight face when you said it. On the inside, I'm like, I'm curious how that's gonna work.
A little curious. I don't know if I'll probably have to be the one that tries it.
No doubt.
I'll be the guinea pig. But yeah, so we'll see how it goes. I'll have to let you know. Yeah.
So other than being the guinea pig, what's your role? Obviously, if your wife's doing a lot of the research, she's digesting a lot of this and then putting it into practice. What's your role when you're not making gun parts and doing all the other stuff on the other side of the basement?
Yeah, so I'm kind of more or less just the maker. I'm going to be the one that's going to be building the chicken tractors or the coops or the the runs. Yeah. So
okay, so Instapot says, I know you guys can't see it, says 18 minutes left on there. When is this going into?
So once we get
take them out?
Yep, once we get that out, we can take the chicken out. Okay. I can start pulling the chicken, and then we can put that in there with the enchilada sauce.
Okay.
And and then we'll roll with it. But the interesting thing about this too, for people that may not have the time to do it, like it's super easy when you want to do this like quickly, because you can just do like a stock pot. If you've got the pulled chicken, or you pull a chicken, that's like literally the longest part, because you can get everything canned. Your enchilada sauce, your peppers, and then all you really have to do is just have some of the seasonings. You just dump the seasonings in there and let it go. So
we do. We are high consumers of rotisserie chicken, just from the ease perspective. Right? $8 or $7, I go pick it up. I can make 3 different things with it, or do whatever. So when I was talking about chicken tortilla soup earlier, 95% of the time we would just use rotisserie chicken, right? Shred it, put it in there, get it done. Again, first time doing black beans to Instapot, so it would be canned black beans, rinse them off, doing whatever, and you can obviously put them in a separate pot and do whatever seasoning or anything that you want to put in there. But seeing it come together like this, we're obviously not doing the homemade enchilada sauce. Sorry to disappoint anybody out there. We're not doing the homemade enchilada, so we're doing a little bit of a quick variation of it. But you could really put this together and probably, depending on how long you want it to simmer to mingle all the flavors, but you could put this together easily in 30 minutes.
Oh yeah.
Have it cooked and have it on a table and be ready to go. I don't want my guests to get second-degree burns by dumping hot chicken all over the place. Yeah. So I'll take the hit, and we'll see if we can fit all this. Are we reserving anything, or are we just?
Oh no. Yep. You just go ahead and dump it because we have more chicken stock. So.
Okay. Any type of variations that you do with this meal, like you change the different peppers you put in here, use a different vegetable instead of corn, or is it always the same recipe every time?
Yeah, it's typically the same. Like I said, I usually eyeball stuff, but if say it's just me or maybe my so my middle son Nathan, he's like me as far as heat goes. He can handle heat.
Right.
And Aiden can kind of too. He's my oldest. But they'll if we're doing something like that and we want to kind of like do it like real hot, we'll like I said, we'll throw in scorpion peppers or just something that we can find that's a little hotter.
You grow those in your garden?
No, I want to, but the problem with cross-pollinating, because we actually ran into that with our banana peppers. They cross-pollinated with our habaneros, and they were actually spicy banana peppers. So that was a fun little thing too, because my daughter, she loves to go in the garden, and she was just like she'll pick like fresh. She knows what's what because she's there with my wife when they're planting everything. So she likes pulling like cilantro like off the thing and just kind of eating it, or we tell her it's like, hey, like we had them separated, and we actually were pretty adamant about that after this little event, but so she knows where like the sweet peppers and the bell peppers and stuff like that are, and she loves those. She absolutely loves peppers. So she'll pull them off and eat them, but she grabbed one off one time and like bit into it and was just immediately like, it's as hot as spicy. My wife was just like, no, it's not. She tried it. She's like, oh, that's spicy. And we realized that they were too close and they had cross-pollinated.
What was all kinds of questions go to mind when I'm thinking about that. I'm sure there's obviously science that goes behind this, and you've, I'm sure, done the research, but
a little bit. My wife more so than me.
So what's the distance, or what's the safe distance that they have to be separated so that they don't have vegetable intercourse or whatever, whatever they're doing?
So honestly, I'm not 100% sure on that. I just know we actually keep the peppers now like on the other side of the cucumbers, and then we'll keep like, so there's probably about at least like 50 feet or so now of dispersion between them. So, and
no issues since then. So since you like super hot stuff, and you're talking about chili earlier, and you're talking about doing Carolina Reapers, is that what you're hoping to grow, or is it some other just like habaneros or Scotch bonnet, like some of that type of stuff?
So honestly, too, that's the other thing. So like, and I hadn't really touched on that, but so with a lot of this stuff, it has a lot more to do with clean eating and not trusting where like our vegetables and our food's coming from.
Sourcing of it, yeah.
So that was the other thing, was like, you got GMO stuff, and that's one of the other big things too. Like people don't realize, but I don't remember if the scorpion peppers are, but I know the Carolina Reaper, it's all lab grown. Like it's not a naturally occurring pepper. So we try to keep things that are not natural or not,
Right.
Yeah, so we try to keep from planting those just to kind of stay away from, GMO stuff. And,
right. So. That's beeping and calling your name.
Yep. So let's hope it doesn't explode on us. So you just gotta. That'll off gas all the pressure, and it didn't blow up, so that's good.
Not yet.
Yeah.
Still gotta take the lid off.
Yeah.
So chicken in the bowl.
Yep.
Okay. It's just after Christmas, but this is a Christmas bowl, so we'll. It's January, but we'll keep it festive. All right.
All right. This is again too where I kind of start eyeballing the spices.
Okay.
So I'll add.
We got Smoked paprika?
Yep, so smoked paprika. All right. Just a touch of cayenne pepper. I didn't test the jalapenos first, so I'm not really sure how hot they are. Sometimes they're kind of hit or miss. Put some cumin.
I don't know if I'm going to be able to tell just based off of one little bite. But...
Yeah. Some ancho chili powder. Some chili powder. And some salt. And then again, too, it being a barracks meal, sometimes I would, because I'll put the some bone broth or chicken stock in here.
Yeah.
But every now and then, like, you know, if I had one thing that we never had like had in abundance was beer. So sometimes I put like a little bit of a beer in here.
Okay.
And kind of mix it up, and it just kind of adds a different flavor or different.
Yeah.
It's dimension to it. I guess I'm don't understand all the cooking terms, but if that makes sense.
You know what you're doing.
Yeah.
A different depth of flavor or whatever.
There you go. Yeah.
Whatever dimension, depth, it's all the same. It's not going to change the way it tastes, so we're good.
Yeah.
So that's going to go back in, then
The corn, the jalapenos. Okay. Yeah, we're almost done.
Oh yeah. So what else do you guys make at home? Like besides, I mean, you guys are doing all kinds of different things with food, but is there a go-to for you guys that you eat more than anything else?
Trying to think. We kind of mix it up a little bit. There's a cookbook, or there's a couple cookbooks that we kind of eat a lot out of that are really good. One of them is Half-Baked Harvest. Okay. And I'm pretty sure they are both professional snowboarders, like Olympic, like, so they actually have like their own, like, you know, it's a cookbook with, you know, a number of like, you know, good, healthy, organic foods and stuff like that. And it's really, really good. And then the other one I think is Five Marys, I believe. And they I think they're like a family that has like a homestead and their own little ranch. And they basically do the same thing. Like, you know, they'll make their, you know, their homemade meals with, you know, good, fresh, organic, like, you know, homegrown stuff. So ingredients. So yeah, they have a Tuscan soup that I really, really like. And then that's the Half-Baked Harvest. Okay. Yeah, which the title of it kind of makes me wonder if, like, you know, snowboarders, half-baked. Like, yeah. But hey, you know what?
It is what it is. The food's good.
Yeah.
All right, beans are done. So what are we doing?
So we're gonna pull these out. We're gonna drain them. Okay. And we're going to fish out the bay leaves that were in there.
Okay.
Which should be pretty easy to find.
So I was going to do all the hot stuff for you. Here I am watching you do all probably the hottest of all of this stuff.
And these beans actually got really soft, but it'll be all right. So I'm not really big on sour cream, but some people put sour cream on it. We'll do like the chopped cilantro, and then you can top it with like avocados, cheese, the jalapenos, and cilantro. That's usually how I eat it.
Well, luckily for you, I forgot sour cream.
Oh, okay.
So, I'm pretty sure. It was like the last thing on the list, and I was like, I feel like I'm forgetting something. And so it's a good thing you didn't say sour cream makes this dish.
Oh, well, by the way, sour cream kind of makes the dish.
Yeah, exactly. So we don't have sour cream. But cilantro, jalapenos, avocados that we can use for garnish. And was there, cheese. Mm-hmm. Cheese was the other thing. So, okay.
Yep. And you can either just top it with the tortilla chips, or you can just dip it.
All right, perfect. So I think we'll let this cook for a couple more minutes. And then next time you see us, we're going to come back. We're going to be a different little location, you know, sit down, break bread together, share this meal, you know, that Ryan was, you know, graceful enough to come over here and cook for us. And then we're just going to get in a little bit deeper conversation about a little bit of background about Ryan, maybe what he's been through. Maybe everybody out there can learn a little bit something. So we'll see you guys here soon. Welcome back. So obviously we're in a different setting now. So Ryan and I finally got done making this amazing meal, this chicken tortilla soup. So we're off camera putting this thing together, and we're ready to dive right in. So again, thanks for being on the show. I appreciate you making this meal in my house. This is amazing. I've been looking forward to this bowl of soup. I said this earlier, at least 2 days because of the snow and getting some warm soup in my belly. So I appreciate that. And while I'm kind of diving in, and we're both diving in a little bit, if you don't mind, let's just kind of start from early years and just kind of stage set a little bit, right? So, where were you born? How would you describe your childhood? That type of thing. Kind of leading up to service. What does that look like for you?
Okay, yeah. So I was born in Dalton, Georgia. Grew up between Athens, Georgia, and Calhoun, Georgia. So I believe I was kindergarten or first grade, I think, when my parents split. So when they split, my dad went back up to Calhoun, and then my mom stayed local in Athens. So we from there we just kind of would spend time back and forth between the two places. So kind of grew up in both places. Home life was good. We had my mom remarried, had a stepdad. My stepdad was he really stepped in a big way in a lot of ways. A great role model and really nurturing, really giving. He was just kind of how he is, and in honesty, he's even more so now that he's a step grandfather. My dad, pretty much the same way. At least he did. Kind of going into things. He was typical dad, I guess. Growing up or whatever, he was kind of hard on us. But I mean, at the same time, I see it though. It was one of the things that helped set me up in my Marine Corps career, because I started kind of having an understanding of things and how to just kind of think before I act or say. So,
right.
But
so Dalton, Georgia. Your parents split up at 7 year in kindergarten, first grade. So you said you split time, or did you spend more time at the dad's house or your mom's after she got remarried with her stepdad?
Yeah, more time in Athens. It would usually spend summers with my dad, and then like some of the holidays. So we kind of go back and forth on those, but I'd still say more time in Athens.
Siblings growing up that you were close to, or?
So I'm with my mom and my dad. I have one brother, like whole brother. I have a adopted brother who's someone we adopted in when I was in high school, and then I have my half sister that was with my dad in his second marriage.
Okay.
So yeah, so I got a little sister, and she's living in Tennessee now. So
I'll get to see her hang out, or
not as much as I'd like to. I really, really wish I could. I think just like with so she's a fair amount younger than me, so it was kind of one of those things that by the time she was like coming into high school and stuff, I was already in the Marine Corps, and I was always constantly deployed. So I missed out on a lot of time with my little sister that definitely regret. Would like to make up for that. And she's got she just had another little boy, Ledger. So I need to go see him. I hadn't seen him, and I haven't seen her daughter yet, but I have seen her oldest son. So
wow. Well, yeah, I was talking to my so I only had one. I have two siblings. I had one that passed away a couple of days after she was born. She had a congenital heart failure and defect and chromosome deficiency. It's called trisomy 18. And it
okay, yeah,
stacked against her, right? Yeah, after she was born. She would have been, she was 4 years younger than me. And then my, the other sibling I have is my sister. So she's 8 years younger than me. But an extremely very similar story to what you just described. Growing up, I definitely wouldn't say we were the best of friends. And that was my fault, right? She would follow me around and she wanted to be in everything that I was in. But just because of the age gap. I mean, the age gap was real hard to make any sort of connection at that time. So when I joined the Marine Corps, I turned 20 in boot camp. So essentially she was 12, just getting ready to hit the adolescent years or the teenage years, or, my daughter's in that area now, and it's hard. So I wasn't there, right? I didn't spend during that time that she was growing up, and would have been a great time to have a big brother as you're going, through teenage girl years. And it's something that I'm reflecting on, from throughout the years of not being able to be there. But anyway, fast forwarding, after I joined the Marine Corps, we've spent more time together. Then obviously since I've gotten out, tried to, I don't say redevelop the relationship, but put more substance to it.
Yeah.
Versus just pleasantries and all those things. So I could fully appreciate exactly. And it's hard.
Yeah.
I mean, I only have one sibling. I got one sibling. She's one state away, and it's not, I could do better. Yeah. Let's just say that I could do better. And I'm sure at some point she'll probably watch this and she's going to be like, yep, he could definitely do it. He could definitely, or my dad. My dad's the one who's always like trying to force, talk to your sister, call your sister, blah, blah, blah. And it's not blah, blah, blah. It's family's huge.
Yeah.
Family's huge. Okay. So, if you think back to, your childhood time and, whether it was Athens or Dalton or anything kind of in between before your service, is there anything that you can reflect back on now to think, man, this chapter in my life really helped shape who I became as an adult that you've, look back on as you've gotten older?
When I was obviously like coming up as a teen, I was definitely in trouble a lot. I was constantly in trouble and I was constantly getting into things. I was very irresponsible and just kind of like went on this whole path of just, nothing's my fault, this and that. And so, and I guess in a lot of ways it was doing everything wrong that kind of led me to doing things right, if that made sense. I knew at one point in time, so I knew that I was going to join the military kind of from an early start. We had, most of our family are all like, we have a fair amount of our family anyways in the military. And one of my cousins I always looked up to was a Green Beret. And that was kind of the route I thought I was going to go. And then I kind of got swayed by the Marine Corps. And then I was like, yeah, I'm going to do the Marine Corps. And that kind of leads us into more or less 9/11.
Yeah.
So when that happened, I was a sophomore, I believe.
Okay.
Just in my sophomore year. And I think that solidified it for me. I think I was originally signed up to go for my contract was aviation electronics technician. So that was what I was going to do. And then obviously like September 13th rolls or 12th rolls around or whatever, the day after, and I roll back in and I'm like, hey, it's not what I want anymore. Like, I want to be an 11. So,
wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So you say sophomore in high school, not
yeah, sophomore in high school. So I still had some time. I was in the late entry program. Obviously, I was in it for like 2 years, like almost 3. But I got my ship date and I was gone like shortly. So again, like I said, I got into a lot of trouble and I was always constantly like screwing around, I guess, as a high schooler. One of the things though was I more or less pretty much kept failing. So like I was a little behind. I didn't get to walk my senior year for graduation. I didn't get to walk. I think I still needed like 2 credits. So I was able to knock one out through summer school. And then there was an opportunity. My guidance counselor came up to me and was like, hey, we're going to start a new high school. It's like, well, what's this about? So they're like, yeah, it's like a learn at your own pace kind of high school. So they're kind of already, got the ground foundation laying and, we're working at this. So, is this something you might be interested in? And I'm like, well, my ship date's is in September. I'm like, yeah, this is what I need. I need to be on it. And they were like, you're not going to finish English in that amount of time. And I'm like, watch me. So it was a cool program because so obviously I only had one course, but you literally come and go as you please. So like if you're like, it's set up for people that are like, that were kind of in my position, but like, maybe they were having hardship. So they're having to work and stuff like that. So, it was open from like one period of time to another period of time. And you just could show up and come and go as you please between those hours. So I came in start to finish or whatever. I think I finished English in like maybe a week and a half and like literally made my ship date. Like, yeah. So that was like a big deal because it proved, I was the first graduate of the high school. It proved like this, hey, this does work. And, and it just kind of went from there. So
you mentioned something in the story you were talking about in terms of 9/11, and everybody's got different stories about, where they were and, what was going on in their life at that time. But you being a sophomore in high school, you were 16 years old or 15 years old or something like that?
I was about like 17.
Okay.
Doubt.
If you could take me back to that moment of, were you watching it on TV unfold while you were in school? What was that like for you? And how did that change you? I know you said it changed you from going, I don't want to touch planes, I want to touch guns as much as possible. What got you to that decision? Like, what was the kind of the mentality you were going through with that?
Well, again, too, like, so, I was literally sitting there, and I can remember I think I was in the third period. It was second or third period. It was in my science teacher's class. I'm trying to think of her name. I can't think of it off the top of my head. But, we were sitting in there, and I think someone was like, people were running around in the hallway, and it was kind of weird. And, which is obviously, my school was kind of weird anyways. We'd have bomb threats, and there was they would lock down the school for drug busts and stuff like that. Like, my school was a little iffy. But, so there was like a bunch of people, and there's obviously a bunch of commotion, everything like that. And I think they made an announcement to turn on to the news. So our teachers, they're scanning through, they're turning the TVs, they're going to the news, and you just see it like the towers are on fire. And it was just like, what? And and I remember thinking, I'm just like, what idiot does that? Like, how do you miss it? How do you hit it? You see it top edge and you hit it. Yeah. And then I think it was around that time that I was sitting there thinking that and seeing that, you see like the second plane like snake around and strike, and it was just like, there was that moment of like, oh.
I was talking about this the other day. I was a corporal in the Marine Corps at the time, and watching it on TV, and actually, we're at home in California, watching it unfold on the news like everybody else, through disbelief and shock, and that really set the tempo and the tone for.
The next your career.
I'm in service. Yeah, I did the rest of my time in service. Obviously, down towards the end, there were certain things that kind of slowed down a little bit, but there was a good 15-year chunk that, I think about the time before that happened. I did in the Marine Corps 3 years before that happened. Mm-hmm. Basic stuff, exercise here, exercise there. Never felt like anything crazy was going to happen or I was going to get into something.
Yeah.
But almost instantaneously, like as soon as that happened, I was just like, wide-eyed, not just in shock, but wide-eyed of what is next? Like, what is next for me? What's next for my family? What's next, for all my friends, all my buddies? Like, it was, there's a lot baked in there. But, obviously we're talking about the Marine Corps now, this kind of blends together.
Yeah.
So you joined the Marine Corps in 2003. Obviously, you were trying to get into the fight. There's a little spot to 10 based upon the build-up that you were just talking about. How soon after you joined were you able to, start getting, was it the first unit you went to? Was it the second unit you went to where you're like, okay, I'm prepping for deployment. I'm getting things, getting things ready. How soon were you able to get your wish, I suppose?
I got my assignment to a small craft company. So, which was one of the like hidden little gems of the Marine Corps. It was great. So got stationed with them, and I think that was in so it puts us at like March or so. So I think, so I showed up because it was like early spring. We show up, and then we are, checking into the thing, and I think we were deployed by September. So literally as soon as we got there, we pretty much jumped into a workup. So did my workup with small craft company, and it was really cool. It was really interesting. Turned out to be a lot of bad blood between us and the commandant at the time, because there was like a arguments kind of going back and forth because he ended up disbanding us. And like the thing was it was like we had already proven that we were an asset, because what we were doing was we were going up and down the Euphrates, and we were finding the caches on the islands that they were setting up. And a lot of times they would they would do like their little attacks and then fall back to the river, hop in fishing boats and stuff like that, and then just start blending back in, like acting like they're fishing or doing whatever. Well, we were right there to catch all the squirters. So you had that, and then like all the caches and stuff we found, we were, doing really good. But I'd say the only one problem that was with that, and again too, it was like with all the early, Marine Corps stuff, it's like, we had like the little thin skin armored Humvees, and we had, and the same thing with the boats. Yeah. And the same thing with the boats. We had like nothing, like an armored plate behind your shield or your gun. That was really all you had. And if you were just on the boat, you didn't have anything.
So we pause there for a second. So what I want you to do is I just kind of describe the boat setup like itself, in this scenario so people can kind of picture it. 15 feet, 12 feet, how many people can fit on there, that type of thing.
So we had just gotten a safe boat made, a boat called a CERC. I can't remember what it stands for now, but so they had just gotten that one, and that was supposed to replace the rack, which is a riverine assault craft. And the rack was like your old school, like almost like a Vietnam style, like PT boat, but it was like the 80s revamp because, yeah. So this small craft, before the war, those dudes were actually doing stuff. They were like down in like Panama and stuff like that, and like messing around with like and drug interdiction and stuff like that. So that's what we had those boats for. Well, they ended up replacing it with the CERC. And then we had the other boats we had. One was literally a Boston whaler, a green Boston whaler. It's just like center console. Yeah, center. Had center console. It hold about like a fire team.
Right.
The CERCs would hold a little more than a fire team. There was like fire team plus like the crew. And then we had our cricks, so the rubber crafts.
Right.
So we had those, and then we had or Zodiacs rather. Sorry. Oh, it's the crick, the CRRC. But for the most part, most of my time, in the beginning, most of the time was spent on Boston whalers, which, again, like you're literally on this little fiberglass hull boat. There's zero armor on it, right. And you're like literally exposed as you ever could be. They're just going up and down the river. Yeah,
whatever.
Yeah, and then we would. Some of them were really old. They didn't have what's called a scupper flap on a couple of them. So like what would happen is whenever you would like come on step, whenever you would stop, so they have like it's literally like a little rubber hose, and so water can drain out, but water can't get back into the boat. Well, when they don't have those scupper flaps, whenever you just stop, the water rushes up against the back of the transom, and it just like goes right into the boat. So you're just sitting there, and you're like, all right, this is about to be a 7-hour patrol. It's like 20 something degrees outside, and now I'm soaking wet. So
starting off great.
Yeah.
Starting off great.
Yeah. So but as time kind of went on, when we got away from the dam, we were in Haditha Dam with that. So we had like kind of like split sections. So we would rotate through. So you would have a squad down at the bottom of the dam, and they would run patrols with the Raiders, which is the Boston whaler. And then at the top we had barracks up until about midway through the deployment, when they were swapping them out, and we got the CERT up there. But we would do like patrols up and around that area. Yeah.
How many people on the boat? Or some people on the boat, or was usually?
Yeah. So with the rack, you could fit a fair amount of people on it, but like comfortably or whatever, we usually had about a squad on one of the racks, and then we would have like I said, you'd have about a fire team each on the Raiders. And then on the CERC was again is about a squad or so. So
obviously you're talking about the Euphrates, you're talking about the DEFA, so you're talking about deployments. These aren't places that are in the United States. For those that don't know. So since we're kind of in that dialogue and in that time frame, however many deployments you went on, or whatever the case may be, was there a specific deployment that you went on, or a specific event from a deployment that you were like, shit was crazy? Truly a handful of moments of shit is crazy events, but one that you kind of look back on and was like, hey, that was an event for me. Like, up until that point, I felt like I was doing great.
So I would say one of the first ones, and I mean it kind of, each one in its own right kind of had something like that. But I remember so my first deployment. And again, too, like, so as we're going over there, and as my friends and stuff are going over there, and people I went like SOI with, like you're hearing they're like KIA and stuff like that, especially like going into Fallujah. So I actually didn't get to go to Fallujah. We went over there, 3 squads. One of the squads went on, maybe it was 4, but one of the squads, 1 or 2, went to Fallujah, which again, it's an absolute miracle those guys made it through. And then, we stayed at the dam, and then there was like a rotation midway through the deployment. But I remember one of my buddies, Parrello, so he was like the very first person that was like, I guess more or less like really close, because we used to hang out, like, we would go to like concerts and stuff like that. So he died and he was like, I think it was like his 18th birthday, I believe.
Oh, shit.
So yeah, so he was young. So, yeah, so then he died on New Year's. So it was, and I want to say it was like literally the day before, the day of, or the day after his birthday. So like he had just, so I mean, basically 17. So that kind of hit me hard. And I think again too, like there was like, a reevaluation of my life. Like I'd said, like I was kind of like, it was almost like my persona. Like people knew that I was kind of a screw up, and I was just constantly just doing like stupid stuff,
Right.
like really stupid stuff. Like, riding shopping carts down my mom's like massive hill, just like bombing them, like just,
Whatever happened to happen.
yeah, just like, and I mean, that was kind of like that. But, again, like I said, just doing completely irresponsible or stupid stuff. And I think like in a lot of ways, I grew up a lot on that deployment, completely changed who I was, I think. And I think from that point on, like I kind of like developed like this level of professionality, or just professionalism, sorry. Just like making up my own words.
Butchers, maybe swear. Butchers will watch this thing and throw it there.
Yeah. But, and again, too, it was, key people that I would just kind of pay attention to and emulate through my career. One of them after that deployment, I would emulate, there was a couple people. So one of them was, our CO. We had the CO who was just, dude, he was a badass, absolute badass. He's actually still in the Marine Corps. He's actually running around Quantico now, but his name was Colonel. He's Colonel now. He was he was a captain back in those days, but it's Colonel Whitnam. So he was our CO, and that dude was like, I would say, cursed with life, like just like crazy stuff. Like he was actually with the I don't know if you remember when 1-2 got the friendly fire incident with he was one of the lone survivors. He was one of the few survivors that was in that. Like that was his guys. Like he was sitting there while they're getting just hammered. Yeah. And then, so that happened. And then on that deployment that we were talking, this one in particular, his truck gets hit with an IED, and he's in the gun turret as the CO, the company CO, and he's in the gun turret and in the 7-ton, and the 7-ton rolls. And, so I guess he comes out of that completely unscathed. His rifle's like snapped in half, and the dude's like running back and forth, like running medevacs and stuff. But yeah, that dude was like,
This had the same deployment as the first event?
Yeah, it's still the first deployment. Yeah. So that was one of the guys I kind of emulated. Another one was, Josh Iverson. So Staff Sergeant Iverson, he was one of our squad leaders, and that dude was just super stoic. Like, he was like the guy to go. He still is the guy to go to when it comes to boats. Like that guy, like no one knows more than he rewrote like the riverine doctrine and manuals for like that when they stood up the brown water unit that the Navy did after we got disbanded. He wrote all that curriculum. So, so he's kind of like the go-to guy, and he's on this other thing now. I think I was telling you about the whiskey project. So they do those boats, and a lot of that stuff though is fueled just by like things that we ran into and like some of the people that we lost, and like, how could we have made this better? What could have did this? What could have fueled this? Or how could we have made this better? And he's figured it out. So that's one of the things. So, I mean, I think, and it kind of helped broker like a deal, I guess, with Whiskey Project and MARSOC not too long ago. So I know MARSOC was supposed to be getting some of those boats, and I really hope it works out well, because I think it's a
full circle thing. Where it's not like, hey, I'm going to start a company and, oh yeah, I like boats, so I'm going to just figure this out. And I played with G.I. Joes when I was a kid, so I'm going to try to sell it to the DOD or something. Right? Yeah, somebody who was actually in there.
Yeah.
Going through everything, right? The ups and downs, the highs, lows, what's working, what's not working. And then coming back and saying, I can make a difference.
Yeah.
I can do this. I can start our own company, and I want it to be specifically to ensure that type of shit doesn't happen again, or at least try to, minimize it as much as possible based upon what it's like the true American story, like from top to bottom for multiple reasons. So obviously I know it's not an easy topic to, talk about friends that have passed, whether it's KIA or whether it's, car accident or something like that. But when that first event happened for you, were you with that? Were you with him when this went down? Is something that you found out after the fact? What was that process for you?
Yeah. So, and I think I was saying before, like how halfway through the deployment, we switched roles. And so we were kind of on dam security. And then we rotated out with the people that were, at Phantom Fury and all that other stuff. It was one of the other platoons. And I had literally talked to him maybe, it was right before Christmas. So it was sometime in December. So it was like maybe a week or two before he died, like a week or two after we had swapped. And, but I remember talking to him. I was just like, dude, it's like after Fallujah, I'm like, you guys are good, man. This is going to be cake. Like it was like one of the last things I said to him was like, you guys are good now. And you're going to be able to relax. It's going to be good. You'd be clearing caches and stuff like that and just doing sweeps through the city. But yeah, it didn't quite happen that way for those guys. We had, one of the guys, my buddy Peak, he ended up getting shot. He got shot by 3 different people. And it was like, one dude on like a roof. Yeah. Like almost like simultaneously. So there was like a dude on the roof. There was like a guy on the ground and one dude in like a waddy or something. And like just right through like the Humvee, like he was sitting in the seat and got hit like 3 different, directions. And he got medevaced. He's doing good now though. And then, obviously, Parrello succumbed to his wounds. I think it was a blast injury from an IED, but, we were out, and I can't remember what we were doing. We were out doing something. I think we were out on like some sort of, we're out on some op, and I honestly, I can't even remember because there was nothing significant that happened on it. So it was kind of like just like a normal, yeah. But I remember coming back and like there was, so we had like a flag in our boatyard. I remember coming back and it was at half mast and there were lights pointed at it. And it was like, that's weird. So we roll into the gate, like into our boatyard. We come in and like, I want to say it was Gunny Tree and some other people. I can't remember who it was, but they like, hey, everybody, just drop what you're doing. Just come over here for a minute, school circle. So we all kind of came around and they had told us that Parrello had passed away. So yeah, that was pretty wild. So we were at Al Assad at that time. We were probably just coming back from like either Blue Diamond, like in Ramadi or one of those places, but yeah.
Well, so I know you said he was 18, super, super young. So probably not safe to assume that he wasn't married because Marines get married super young, but was he married?
Yeah.
And if that was okay?
Yeah, just his parents in New Jersey. So
have you talked to them or did you ever go see them?
I've talked to his mom, Shirley. I've talked to her once or twice when in the very, very beginning, but I haven't, I mean, I follow her on Facebook and stuff like that, but I haven't really talked to her a whole lot. I've been wanting to go up there every now and then. They'll do like little reunion things and stuff like that up there at his grave. It's in, I want to say it's in Newark, but yeah. So
when you talked to his mom, was it, hey, this is how I remember him, or this is how I knew him? Or was it?
So it was kind of funny too, because it was like a story, and I think it all kind of came full circle. So it was like, it was shortly after we got back, she came down and like she was visiting, like her and her husband were visiting with everybody, and I talked to them a little bit, and I was like, we were all kind of like sharing stories. I'm like, hey, remember that one time Brian called you and was like, yeah, I got to replace my window and all this other stuff. And she was like, yeah, I remember that. And I was like, yeah. So what happened was we went out of bounds on a weeknight to go to a concert. And at the end of the concert, we realized that he had locked his keys in the car and we couldn't get anyone. Well, this is back here before cell phones. So we're just like, shit, what are we going to do? And he's like, oh, screw it. So he took off his shirt and just hammered in his window or whatever, and we get back. It was such a cold ride back too. But yeah, so we get back to base and like literally we get back, we throw on our clothes and we made like just in time for formation. So like we're like exhausted, just like the Fooey should just beat. But
drained from the adrenaline rush and trying to break into your vehicle and figure all that shit.
Yeah, we're coming back from Myrtle Beach. Yeah, so it was at the House of Blues was the concert we went to. But yeah.
So that was first deployment. How many deployments did you end up doing?
Yeah, so I only did 3. I kind of fell in like this weird gap. Yeah. But I mean, I know lots of people that are like it's like their 7th or 8th or 9th, 10th. But yeah, so I did that one, and then as soon as I came back from that one, I was almost in the middle, like halfway through a workup. I actually went to 1-2, which I had the option. Like some of the guys were going to BRC, some of the guys were just going, it was mainly either BRC. They handpicked a couple of the coxswains and whatever to go over to the Brown unit stuff. That was where Staff Sergeant Iverson went. And then before I forget him too, the other guy that I used to emulate was a guy named James Talby or Jimmy Talby. He's which I still keep in touch with him too. Him and Josh. But sorry, where was I going with that?
You were talking about the other deployments and going to 1-2.
So we jumped right into 1-2, and that was like an interesting thing. So I already had this whole mindset of like professionalism because everyone was like a silent professional. Everyone was like, you kind of knew your part. The CO had this open door, like a legitimate open door policy. They talked to you, and you were on big boy rules. So that was like, that was my first introduction to the Marine Corps. And then I get to a regular line unit, and it was not that way.
Very different.
Yeah, it's like, why are you talking to the gunny? And I'm like, why wouldn't I talk to the gunny? He's a man just like me. Like, you know what I mean? And just like stupid stuff like that, which it was really funny though, because like in a lot of ways, like some of my peers and some of like the like corporals and stuff, because those still Lance Corporal then. So yeah, so we went out with them. That was my second pump. And we were actually right down the road from Aditha. We were at Heat. So we had another thing with that. We lost 3 Marines during that deployment. It was Corporal Arena, Lance Corporal Parr, and PFC Span. Or I may have those two backwards, but they were with those two were Charlie Company. But so we lost those guys. They got hit by an IED while out on patrol. But yeah, that deployment was. I mean, aside from that, I mean, we did that. Doc Dinglason lost both his legs, and they ran over a mine during one of the patrols. I mean, other than that, it really wasn't like a super eventful thing. But again, too, like I was saying before, like I had like this level of like professionalism that I think carried over from small craft, and it wasn't quite like that. I don't think I fit in, I think, with some of those guys from 1-2, because we butt heads on like a number of things. And, one of their big things was like hazing, and like, yeah, I mean, it is what it is, but like, I treated, because I came over as a fire team leader, and I was just like, well, I'm not just going to haze my deeds for no reason. Like, yeah, just to do it. I'm like, you know what, you guys can do that. It's like, yeah, I understand, there's a level of like, keeping your Marines like, salt and vinegar and, piss and vinegar, sure, rather. But it's like, whenever I would do stuff with them, it was like one of those things. It's like, well, I lead by example. So it's like, if you fuck up, I'm going to make you do whatever, but I'm going to do it with you. Sure. So like, and that kind of was like beyond them, because their seniors didn't do that with them, but like my seniors did. So like, like they would just be out there making them do stupid stuff. But like, here I am, like out there doing 8 counts. Yeah. With the PFCs and stuff like that. And like, we had one of our Marines like left his rifle at the water bowl or whatever. So I'm like, all right, cool. We're all low crawling back to the water bowl. And they get your shit, like crawling. Yeah. Moving under fire. Like, so yeah. So that was kind of like my mindset. But like, I think because of the fact that I wasn't just like, hazing my Marine, I think maybe got taken as like a kindness for weakness kind of thing. So that kind of sucked. But long story short, like I was not really a fan of being in 1-2. We ended up when we were coming back from from that deployment, we had they had like a sit down, and like I think it was like I can't remember if it's the XO or the CO. But you had like a sit down with me, and he was talking. He's like, so what do you want to do after this? And I'm like, well, I wanted to go recon before, because that was one of our options. I'm like, but I also really wanted to deploy again. So he was like, well, so we kind of talked about that one for a little bit. And then he was just like, well, have you ever thought about like, TBS? I'm like, well, what do you mean? He's like, well, you seem to have like a good wealth of knowledge, you're sound in your stuff or whatever. He's like, you ever thought about going to train officers? And I'm like, I don't know. And he's like, well, you'll get like your downtime, and your schedule's a little more set. Like, it's like, you'll get to shoot officers with sim rounds. I'm like, let's try that. So
sign me up.
Yep, got it. So yeah. So I did that. I did it for the first year. It was all right. It was pretty cool.
What rank were you at this time?
So I had just picked up corporal. So I went over there as corporal. Yeah. So picked up sergeant within like a year or so. And then I was just like, okay, I'm done with this. I'm ready to go back to the fleet. So like, well, what do you want to do? It's like, well, I need to go back. And like, they're like, this is a 3-year thing. You're here. I'm like, well, shit. So I was like, well, I started looking. I was like, well, when I leave here, I still want to go recon. So start looking at you like, oh, you're a sergeant now. We're not taking sergeants anymore. And I'm just like, well, crap. So now I didn't have that. So yes, I really didn't know where I was going to go after that. And then my cousin, the Green Beret, was like, whoa, you ever thought about either cross-decking or maybe CAG? And I'm like, CAG? Like, I might give that a try. And then some recruiters came down, talked to us, and then there was a handful of us. We kind of got our stuff rolling. We were going to go do CAG selection. One of them was Jolly, who went on to become very successful. But I think so I ended up getting into a near fatal car accident about a month before we were supposed to go to assessment selection. So I didn't get to go to assessment selection. Everyone else in the group did. We had one guy that finished but got like injured or something like that. Jolly got selected right off the bat, and then they went on to do whatever. But meanwhile, I got put into the safety office. So I'm sitting there while I'm trying to like heal up and everything. So at that time, there was Sergeant Major Ashton, who helped stand up MARSOC. He was an old recon dude from like 3rd. And he would come into my office every day, and he would just sit down and drink coffee with me. And he's like, you ever thought about MARSOC? And I'm like, I don't know, I want to do this. And, almost every day, it was just in my office. He's like, so you're going to start training again? You're going to start training again? I'm like, what about MARSOC? What about MARSOC? And then finally I was like, you know what? That might be a good idea. At least get my foot in the door in the SOCOM world, go to MARSOC, and then, see if I can get established there.
Just pivot somewhere else.
Yeah. And then see if I can, go to CAG after that. So I, so decided I'd sign up for assessment selection, went through it, dude. It was one of the coolest experiences I think I've had, like Marine Corps wise, like just like the way how professional the course was run was just insanely awesome. It's really weird because every day was kind of a mystery. You don't really know what's going on until it's happening, because you have like a whiteboard that you take all your instructions from. So you don't really know what you're doing literally until it's time to do it, unless you had like classes. So you had that. And then the other cool thing too, and it was like one of those things I almost thrived off of, because the way they had it set up was there was enough mattresses and or beds for the candidates that were left. So when you go to an exercise, when you had people like quit, you would come back and there'd be mattresses gone. And like every single event, every single evolution, we'd come back and there was more and more light you would see from all the mattresses being gone. And like, you're just like, yeah, I'm getting further and further. And like, you would feed off of it. And, so made it all the way through. I think they called up like a group of like 4 or 5 of us or something like that. And I was just like, we're like the first ones to go to the boarding thing. And I was just like, shit. I'm like, I think that's probably it. They're just going to mass dump who they want to get rid of. So we walk into this room. The first face I see is Sergeant Major Ashton. And he's sitting on the board. And I'm just like, okay. And he's just kind of cut like
he recognized you.
Oh, yeah. He cut me like a sly grin when he saw me. So we're sitting there and they were like, yeah, it's like, yeah, they didn't even board us. They were just like, hey, it's like, you guys were the top 5 of the class, blah, 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 blah.
Shit.
Welcome to MARSOC. So it's like, yeah, basically, hey, remember, everyday selection. Just because you got selected here, this is just the beginning of your path.
Keep busting your ass.
So that was awesome. So
how many started in that class, and then how many ended up making it all the way through?
I want to say we started with like 100. So the early years it was a little different. So you had to train yourself. So like they kind of gave you like a pamphlet, and it's like, hey, this is suggested. Show up ready to go, which I liked. But at the same time, I could kind of see what was also a bit of a waste of money, because like you're sitting there in like the very first phase before you even leave, and you've got guys that can't swim, like can't do a lap. Like they're just drowning right there, right off the start. And it's just like, yeah. So by the time you leave, then you do whatever. Then like the very first, your very first thing, your very first evolution was a hike. It's an unknown distance hike. And so you lose dudes right off the bat there. And I think now they do it, like they don't do it where they used to do it. So it's like, that way they're not, because you lose a lot of people there. So now you have to pay to send people back and all sorts of stuff. So
it's a cost of
logistically, yeah.
Some attrition ends up being pretty high.
Yeah. So like I was saying, so I think we started with close to 100. I think we finished with around 20. And I think it was like 13 or 14 that they put through. And then the attrition rate is almost the exact same for ITC. So you show up at ITC, I think we started with like 60 or 70 people. And I think by the end of it, I think we graduated like 20. So yeah, so it's a pretty crazy attrition rate.
for good reasons.
Yeah, right.
For absolute great reasons. I mean, they put all the different, I don't say obstacles like actual obstacles, but just the obstacles of the process, right? The obstacle process of getting through there. So you leave 1-2, you go to TBS for 2 years or so, and then you're able to leave after that. And you get the MARSOC. How soon after you got there were you able to actually get on deployment through with MARSOC? Was it pretty quick, or took you a while?
Once I got to the team, obviously like that's one of those other interesting things because like, and it should be that way. It's like everyday selection again. Like I said, like they're always watching you. You're always constantly being graded and being weighed. And yeah, I mean, you could be off a team just as fast as you're on a team, which I found out, going on into my career. But so I get there and they're like, hey, you're going to be a JTAC. I'm like, heck yeah. So I'm like sitting there, I'm like doing all my JTAC primers, got everything ready to go. I'm like was almost done, literally almost done with like all my JTAC primers when they're like, you're going to be a comm chief. You're going to comm school. I'm like, what? So I ended up going to MNOC and started, we were like one of the first classes going through MNOC. So there was a bunch of kinks I had to work out. Met another interesting individual that I still talk to today. His name is Jamie Slife. He's a good dude. So went through, I think it was like a 3-month course down in Lejeune, which was kind of interesting because my wife at the time had literally just moved out to California to come, got our house and everything like that. And like literally like a couple weeks after she got to California, I went back to Camp Lejeune for 3 months.
Sorry about that.
Yep. So no, not at all. So it's definitely not a life conducive to married life. Yeah. But so went out to Camp Lejeune. I was out there for 3 months for MNOC course, for MNOC. Came back. Once I got back, we basically just started doing all of our stuff at like NATC and, or not NATC, sorry, NTC. Yeah, NTC. So went out there, so kind of was just doing back-to-back stuff like that. And then again, did a driving course. So that was out in Borrego Springs. So like, it just was not home. And then when I was home, like I was in the office from like sun up to sundown. So did all that, got ready, went out the door, and that deployment was like, literally that was probably like the epitome of like deployments. Like that was a rough one. Like we were getting into like 2 to 3 firefights a day. We were getting into at least 2 or 3 ticks a week. It was
constant.
Yeah, it was crazy. No.
Yeah, does a lot.
But in a lot of ways it was interesting and, came through with, pretty close to some of those guys. And it was when so it was kind of interesting. So I guess before the deployment, a lot of those dudes were again, like single or whatever. So they would all go out and hang out in like Carlsbad and Oceanside and like, and like party and burn it down and stuff like that when they were off. But, being, having a wife and 3 boys, I didn't do it. I'd go home. I'd spend any free time I got, I would spend with, Aiden, Nathan, and Tyler. And so like I didn't have some of those bonds that some of those guys had until like we started, until we got over there. But so we were in Afghanistan, 2012. But that was trying to think of where to even start on that. But so like I said, it was a pretty rough deployment. We lost 3 guys, Sky Moat, Ryan Jeske, and Matt Manukian. They were killed during a insider attack in Sangin. So that was pretty rough. And then during one of our operations, we had an area that we thought that the Taliban. So again, like I said, we were getting into fights every day, and it was kind of cool. We kind of hung back when we first got there because there were so many IEDs in the area and so much stuff like that. Like the team that we replaced wasn't really going out on patrols. It just wasn't worth the squeeze for them. So like it was like one of those things where like they were kind of more in a defensive position and they just kind of wait till they came to them to fight. Well, we let it roll on like that for like with the first month or so. Then we started sending out ambush patrols and it worked like a charm. It was
after not doing it or not receiving anything from the enemy's perspective for so long, and then now you're bringing the fight to them. I'm sure they were shocked as hell.
Oh yeah. So that was the first big thing that was like a big blow to them, and it got to a point where they we killed so many of the people that knew how to get to where we were without hitting any of the IEDs or the booby traps or anything like that. They basically started bringing in foreign fighters, and they would have the foreign fight. Like they would have one of the guys like almost act as a guide, bring them in, and they would come and get them and then take them out. So at this point, we're like, all right, well, let's see if we can cut the head off the snake. Let's figure out where they're crossing the river. So we had an idea of where we were going to go. We set up our position. Like came out like in the middle of the night. It was like this compound there was like a double compound. So they were kind of, you had a smaller one and kind of like a little bit of a bigger one. They were kind of like, but they were more or less together. So we go into the compound and we start setting up and just kind of eyes on the river. So we got all our stuff set up. We got a bunch of sandbags and stuff. We're just sitting there on the roof, just waiting for the sun to come up. And sure enough, as soon as the sun started coming up, we spotted a dude coming across. So it was like, all right, you know, and I'm sitting there with another guy again too, like someone else that I tried to emulate a fair amount when after getting to know him and stuff was a guy named Brian Jacklin. He's a Navy Cross recipient. But this guy was just like, so he's sitting up there and, you know, he's a sniper, and sniper school is one of the schools I always wanted to go to. It was one of the ones I could never get to. It just was never really in the cards for me. But, so I'm sitting up there and, you know, I'm in this position with them and, we get eyes on the guy and I'm like, hey, I've got him. And then Brian's like, hey man, if you've got him, drop him. I'm like, got it. So I'm all excited or whatever. And I wasn't even paying attention. So I'm sure you remember how like some of the rooftops in Afghanistan have like the bread top things or whatever. So I'm sitting there sighted in. I can see him on my scope, but my barrel was just at like so like I, you know, just got overexcited and just, you know, didn't set up right. Well, they pulled the trigger and I just saw a big plume and I knew immediately. I was like, crap. And, you know, so you could hear like the disappointment in Brian's voice when he's like, he looked over at Ricky. He's like, Ricky, who's behind the saw. He's like, you got him? And Ricky's like, I got him. So Ricky lets off a burst. It hits the guy in the stomach and he falls down. So he's sitting there and we're kind of like looking and, you know, I readjust. I'm sitting there and I sight back in and, you know, see the guy, he pops back up or whatever. Like he's hitting the stomach and he's kind of like up on all fours. And I'm like, hey, he's up. I'm like, I've got him. And he's like, if you got him, it's like, yeah. He's like, you got him this time? And I'm like, yeah, I got him. So I pull the trigger, hit him, he drops. About that time, our team leader comes running around, Captain Herrera. So he comes around to the bottom of the stairs or where the ladder is going up to the roof. And he's like, hey, what's, you know, sit rep. So we're like kind of explaining what's going on. He's like, all right. He's like, hey, come on down. He's like, I'm going to switch out with you guys. So he goes up and he takes one of our JTACs with him. So they go up, me and Brian come down. I move to a different position or a different wall and I'm sitting there and almost immediately dude comes out with a walkie-talkie and starts calling in stuff. And I'm like, hey, I got a spotter. They're like, hey, if you got him, drop him. I'm like, got him. So like, you know, I think it's something was said to the effect of like, all right, just go ahead and suppress him. So one round just goes off. Here, one round is everybody's like, are you good? Then you hear it coming over the net. Are you good? And it's like, yeah, I domed that guy. Like, so they were just like, oh, okay. Probably shouldn't say it over the net, but yeah.
We understand what you're saying.
Yeah. So I hit that guy. He drops. You know, and then like right after that, so I'm like, turn around, we're talking about that or whatever. And then the next thing you know, I hear like a bunch of snaps and cracks and they're like right over my head. So I don't know if they were shooting at me or if they had saw the guys that we had on the roof. But like, so I'm sitting down like in this like little courtyard area, like over the wall. These guys are up here on like the rooftop. So I hear the snaps and cracks. I know those rounds are close. I know they're pretty much right over my head. And then I realize that it's, guys on the roof. So I turn around, I'm like, hey, like, you guys okay up there? And as I'm turning to say that, the one JTAC sitting there and he's just got like, his eyes are huge. Like you could tell like it was bad, like something, you know, whatever. So I'm just like, oh crap. So I look up the ladder. I'm like, hey, you all right? And I could hear like Captain Herrera's like, yeah. And he's kind of like gasping, talking. He's like, I'm hit. I can't feel my legs. And I'm like, shit. So I'd start climbing up the ladder, you know, so I'm kind of like half on and half off at this point. And I'm like, you know, trying to work on him. And, I cut off his, like, you know, I cut into his shirt so I can see what's going on. And he's got like a sucking chest wound out of his back. It just missed his plate. You know, so I'm sitting there and then I remember like once he was getting shot at again. So I'm like, shit. I'm like, all right, man, in for a penny, in for a pound. I got to do this. So I climb, I go all the way up onto the roof, and I'm like sitting there trying to work on him. And I remember like, rounds are cracking and snapping, and I'm like I'm trying to pack his wound, which in hindsight probably wasn't the best thing, but I didn't have anything. I tried to look up my
whatever you're going.
Yeah, I didn't have an Asherman chest seal or, any kind of chest seal for that matter. So it was just like, I was trying to figure it out. Eventually, basically what I had did was I had started packing it. I'm like, all right, no, that's probably not a good idea. Like, you're just in a cavity. It's not like a normal, like into your flesh or into your meat. It's actually into a cavity where you're breathing. So stop doing that. And then I basically just kind of got the palm of my hand wet and was just trying to use suction to like hold it. So I'm like holding him, and I'm like kind of leaning over, and I'm trying to kick my buddy Ricky, who was on the roof behind the saw. So I'm kicking his foot, and I'm like, hey, Ricky, give me cover fire. And that's when I realized Ricky was slumped over a saw. And yeah, so I was just like, shit, I'm in it now. About that time, our corpsman and a couple other guys come running into that little courtyard area, and they're like, hey, what's going on? I'm like, hey, so I'm giving them a sit rep. I'm like, Captain Herrera's got a sucking chest wound in his back. He can't feel his legs. Ricky's unresponsive. And like everyone's like, you could just, you hear it all set in. It's like, oh shit. Like, we're in, world of hurt right now. So, they start coming up the ladder. I start getting Captain Herrera like situated to get him down. We pass him down. And at this point, I just like, I'm kind of already still a little like, I can't believe, Ricky's whatever, but I'm just like, I've got to lay down cover fire. I've got to return fire. So I go to roll Ricky off, and as soon as I roll him off, he makes like a gurgling noise, like, and like tries, like he's trying to talk. So, so he makes that noise. I'm like, hey, Ricky, I think Ricky's alive. So I start like trying to talk to Ricky, and he's like trying to communicate. You can tell like he's just, yeah, but he's got a through and through wound through the back of his neck. And, so I bring him back over the ladder. We get him back down, and I get back behind the saw. I just start laying back down fire and shooting back for a while, and pretty much just until I ran out of ammo, and the sandbags were all beat to shit. And they weren't really stopping much. So then they're like, hey, you need to pack up and come down. So I'm like, all right, hey, roger that. So grab all the stuff, come back down the ladder or whatever. So now I'm back in the courtyard, and they're needle D'ing Captain, my buddy Hafiz. He's so he's needle D'ing him, and he's working on him. And I go back over to Ricky, and so I'm like stuffing my fingers in his neck and just kind of like trying to hold him still, because at this point he's trying to get up and move around. It's like, dude, like, no, you're shot in the neck, still, like, just he's just sitting there complaining about flies in his face. Yeah, so we do that. We get those guys kind of like stable and ready to move. We start calling in with I believe it was Dust Off. So it was like the PJs. So we call in a medevac with them. So they get ready to, they get spun up and ready to go. And, we've got like an interpreter with us, and we got icons. We're listening to everything they're saying. And so at one point, like, we're sitting there, we're like, all right, yep, hey, let's not leave the door. Let's make our own hole. We're going to go through that hole because they're already going to be trained on any of the exits. So they know where we're coming. They know that we had injuries because we could hear what they were saying. So they knew we took casualties. So we got ready, and then, Brian basically rogered up. He's like, hey guys, he's like, we got to get he's like, I know, this is completely up to you guys, but like, because this is going to get really bad when we leave this wall. He's like, but dude, we got to get these guys out of here. They're not going to live. So we're like, all right, cool. Everybody, like, without skipping a beat, man, we were all on it. So we jump on the stretcher. I jump on the front of Ricky's stretcher, and they blow a hole in the wall, like right as, like shortly before, as the helicopters are kind of coming in. And basically the guy, the interpreter on the thing was like, hey, they see the hole. They're telling everybody to shift their fire. It's like, all right, it's now or never. So we just kind of like peel out. So we had like the ANASF guys that we had with us, and their leader, which was one of our guys, Prime. They peel out of the wall, and they start, like laying down this cover, like this wall of fire for us in all directions as we start coming out. So we run out across this basically, filled with like the puff mud. So you're like, calf deep in this mud trying to fight through it or whatever. And there's rounds snapping, and UGLs are going off and exploding. And, so we get to almost to the helicopter, and the helicopter takes back off, and they're just like, hey, it's too hot in LZ. We're going to do, hold in place. We're going to do a gun run, and we're going to come back. So they take off, they go around, they start shooting or whatever. And, when that happens, it's like shit. So we drop them, but we'd already cut off all their kits, so they don't have any armor on. So I'm like, fuck, so I just yelled, I'm like, hey, they don't have any armor. So I'm like, diving and scrambling on top of Ricky, trying to use my plates. So I'm like covering him and trying to use my plates, and there's like rounds, like dirt kicking up and stuff all the way around us and everything. The bird comes back, and we throw those guys on the bird or whatever, and then we had to shoot our way back into the compound. So we get back into the compound and basically just throw a bunch of trash and mattresses and shit up on top of or back up against the wall. I mean, obviously doesn't do anything for cover, but at least for concealment reasons, you can't see you moving around. So we did that, and then like at that point, it's like, yeah, hey, we're gonna need a resupply on ammo. So we call in for a resupply on ammo, and these birds come in and they hover over us, and then they go out and they just drop the bag in the field, and it's like, oh, cool, yeah, it's like cool, well, thanks, we'll watch it. So we basically just waited, and we just got into sporadic gunfights, like, for the rest of that night until the evening fell. Then that's when it got dark, and then we got a SEAL augment. So the SEALs came, and it was actually certain senator who came out there, and or congressman or whatever, but he came out. So it was back when he was an officer, and it was actually the night he lost his eye. But yeah, not to air dirty laundry. So I mean, I've got my opinions of that guy, but yeah,
not a political show.
Yeah.
Conversation. It's all good. No, it's all good. So there's a lot that you had get kind of packed in there. I don't want to obviously dismiss any of that or gloss any of that over, because those are significant events for somebody to go through. But, if you took in, from first deployment, when you went, the loss of your friend, working through that, and then you do the 1-2 deployment, and there's a few guys that are KIA on that deployment, and then you move into MARSOC, which obviously is jam packed with action. You're in it, right? I mean, you're not only like losing people in the unit, but you're like losing people around, right? Mm-hmm. And the people that you're connected with and going through this life event with. I mean, that life event is selling it short, but
yeah,
through the shit. At what point do you remember actually reflecting on any of those events?
So honestly, it was like one of those things, like I felt like I didn't really have any time to reflect on it. And it wasn't until TLD. So we used to do TLD when SOCOM would come back. So every time you'd come back, like they would have like a spot that you would go to. It's usually foreign. We were supposed to go to France, but I guess apparently there was an international incident with like the SEALs that had just left right before us. So like, yeah, Paris is no longer a go. We're going to go to like, I think it was like Santa Clarita or something like. So it's like, oh, okay.
Close.
Yeah. So we get back, and, we go to this little town or whatever. And, I shut myself in the room or whatever. And I remember at one point I'm just sitting there like, completely naked, just sitting there in the blankets with like the AC just like blaring with all the lights off, and just sitting there in the dark, just being like, what the hell? Like, just, yeah.
Just thoughts were at your mind, just kind of like.
Because I think everything had just kind of like caught up, and it was just like, what the hell did I just go through?
Yeah. So when you move on from that, right, and at some point you come back to the States, what was that transition like, actually coming back to the States? Like, were you, still feel like super immersed in everything that had happened, or did you feel like you could come back, take a deep breath, kind of reset and process, or that just wasn't part of the game plan?
So, and it's really weird. Like, I almost think that I'm almost like a weird disconnect. Like, because I know that I probably should be a lot more like whatever than than I am, but it's like, and I don't know, maybe I just buried it so down deep that or maybe I just too dumb to comprehend it. But yeah, so like, I mean, like I said, so I had that like moment of like, life, and there was a number of life changes, and again, I won't get into too many of them, but just for the sake of, like I said, certain, people and, hair and laundry, but I really, really contemplated life and how short it was. Cause I think at that point it really was like it was a huge eye opener. So like, yeah, sitting there in the dark, it just kind of was just like reevaluating my life and just like, certain things like that. And it was just like, okay. So at that point, I pretty much started more or less, I think, living my life like knowing that it's like, yeah, like we're not promised. Like, I think that was probably the first time that I didn't feel invincible, if that makes sense. But I mean, and again, too, and I think it was just looking back at it, because even in the time, it was like, like, and people have said, hey, that's a pretty wild thing, and it's just like, well, not really. Like, if you really think about it, like the guys that I was with, the guys that I trusted, like I trusted those guys with no end. And like, it's kind of like one of those things where it's like, dude, it really is easy to act or think that you're invincible when you've got guys to your left and your right that are just of the highest caliber.
Right. We're going to do whatever it takes. No questions asked, man. Think about it.
And to them, but then you kind of, but still really not invincible. But, so, I mean, that was kind of like a life-changing point, but then it was just kind of like I said before, it's like in for a penny, in for a pound. Like, this is what I'm going to do. This is what I want to do. This is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. And that kind of plays into, right around the time when I got out. Cause like I was saying, like, the whole thing with the teams, I had some incidents, with jumping and doing some stuff like that, and kind of got on the outs with the team that I was in. That was when I was in Delta. Cause when we came back, we became Delta, and then they stood up a new Charlie company. So I went to that Delta company, and it was like a number of things that kind of went on. And again, too, like I was saying, like with my now ex-wife or whatever, that was, another thing. It was one of those things, like I said, I was pondering, and there was a number of things that happened while I was gone that kind of played into some stuff where it was just like, this isn't what I want to do. Like, this is too short. Like, I'm not going to do this. Long story short, like I ended up, kind of, if I was around the time I found my wife, my current wife, my last wife. Yeah. But, yeah. But, we, built like this relationship, and it was just like great. And, I'm couldn't be happier in that relationship. But, I guess somewhere along the way though, like I had some issues with my command, and they got to this point where they just had it in for me, like legitimately. And I ended up getting NJP'd for something I didn't do. And, I was basically told, it was like one of those things. It's like, hey, like if you take this NJP and just shut up and sign the paperwork, you'll be back on the teams, and you'll be, whatever. It's not that big a deal. It's just an NJP. And I was like, yeah, because I was picking up staff sergeant, all this other stuff, and it wasn't like a battalion level JP. It was a company level NJP. So it's like, all right, yeah, it's not going to really affect me, other than the fact it's like, whatever. I'll have an NJP in my whatever. And Chesty Puller said every real Marine has at least one NJP. So I'm like, all right, cool, whatever. It's not like something I can't bounce back. Plus, it's my only way back to the teams.
That's what you want to do.
Yeah,
you should do it.
Yeah. So sure enough, man, I signed it, got everything done. We went over, and then they put me in the armory. Like, they didn't put me back on a team; they put me in the armory, and I'm like, what the hell? So like, yeah, I just kind of like dealt with it for a little bit, just kind of doing my thing, and and then it turned out too that there was like this weird loophole that they knew that I fell into, because I never received my, I was getting paid, and it was all on my MOL, all my stuff, everything said staff sergeant, but they never gave me my warrant. And because they never gave me my warrant, they were able to basically defer or cancel or turn away my warrant. And it's not because it was so at battalion levels where they can take it a rank, mm-hmm. Company level they can't. But because I never officially received my warrant,
so you never have it.
Yeah, they could just make it disappear. So I just was like a sergeant. So now they did. I was a sergeant, and I wasn't back on the teams. So I got to a point where, like, so I brought it up, and I kind of was like, hey, this is bullshit. You guys went back on this. Like, you guys lied to me. And they were like, nope, too bad. Like, shut up and go back to the armory. And it was just like, okay. So I was just like, I'm done with this. So I call up my monitor. I'm like, hey, I need orders. I want to go to second. I was like, well, what? And I'm like, yeah, I gotta leave. I gotta leave first. Like, I don't want to do this anymore. Blah blah blah. Like, I just need a clean start at another unit. And he's like, well, what's going on? What's going on? So I started telling him. He's like, holy shit. He's like, hey, look, no. He's like, just write me an email, explain everything that's going on, so I can explain this case, and just send me the email. So I put my heart and soul in this thing, and I start typing away. So I'm writing up this letter. I'm writing up the whole story, and I'm trying to be as non-biased as I can. I'm trying to tell.
You should read this email at some point.
Yeah. So I'm telling it objectively. And like, I go to hit send and I'm like, fuck it, all hands. I want to go to the general. So it went to,
Holy
like,
shit.
all hands. I'm like, cool. We're all going down on this ship. So yeah, hit send. And then was just like, okay, that was probably a bad idea. So I'm like, all right. I'm like, yeah, hey, that round's downrange. Like, all right, cool. Let's see what happens. So holy shit. So I got my ass chewed every day for like a month. And it was just like, it was almost instantaneous. As soon as that whole thing went down, like, I guess general or whoever read it was like, no, he goes back on the team today. So they were like, wait, what? And then like, so like, I completely just like really just like threw that out there. And like, I guess they took a look at my stuff and they were just like, yeah, no, he's going back to a team today. And, so I get in there and, I'm in and out of offices, just getting, chewed. And, they finally were like, they put me back onto a team and it was like, almost like, well, I'm here, but this is definitely not what I wanted. So they sent me to Alpha Company and I was a pariah when I first showed up. Like, I was just like, I was like, hey, I'm supposed to be on team 1. I'm a jump guy. And they're like, no, you're not. Like, you're not in our team. Go talk to, you're supposed to be in team 2. So I'm like, crap. So I go to team 2 and I'm like, hey, and they're like, nope, you're not in team 2. You go to team 3. So I go to and then so like I go to them and they're just like, nope, So I kind of just got put like in headquarters. So I'm just like, crap, well, this didn't work. But yeah, about halfway through that deployment, the next deployment, so we did a deployment to Guam. And again too, it's like, all right, cool. It's like clean slate though. I mean, I just got to start over. I've got to, make a name for myself again. So I just, nice nose to the grindstone and just started working and just like doing everything again. And we were there with team 1 with the SEALs, and somewhere along the lines, they started talking to those guys, and they working with them and helping them with stuff. And I was there to like stand up an EAC lab, so I stood up an EAC lab, was working with the EOD unit there. I guess they enjoyed working with me, and so about halfway through deployment, like they basically go, hey, look, I'm getting sick and tired of the SEALs asking if they can take you places. It's like, do you want to go on a JCET with the SEALs? And I'm like, yep. So it was one of those things where it's like about midway through the deployment, they realized that I wasn't what people had made me out to be. And I'd kind of started bringing, rubbing that tarnish off my name. And, so things were starting to look up. Some of the other teams, were the team leaders and team chiefs, had kind of like, hey, wait a minute. Like, do you think Ryan could come back? And they're like, so they were trying to get me, but like I'd already, with some of the stuff that I was doing on Guam, I was already kind of like nailed to that now because I was the only EAC guy. So I got pulled out to go with SEAL Team 1, one of their, I guess, squadron. I can't remember how they break that down, but I went out with them to go on a JCET to Sri Lanka. So we're out at Sri Lanka, and it was fun at first, and whatever. But we ended up having a training fatality. It was wild. We were doing hook and ladder, so we were doing VBSS, so we're doing in the middle of hook and ladder operations. And I was basically the safety officer to make sure, talking to the guy that was up on the rail to make sure that, everything was hooked and they were good, and then I would start kind of like, sending the guys up. Well, we start doing, so we're, it was like normal. I mean, we've been doing this for a couple of days at this point, and we come alongside, we're doing whatever. The sea states were a little heavier than normal. But I remember just hearing someone say, oh shit. And I'm like looking at the coxswain station, and then I look back and we're like going under, like at a weird angle, like, cause we started drifting apart from the ship at like a weird angle, and we started hitting like waves like this. And I guess they just throttled up at the wrong time, and like a wave came over the bow of the rib, and it started to dump like this. So I had just enough time to turn, take a couple steps towards the coxswain station, and then I just ran across the coxswain station and jumped as clear from the boat as I could. So we get to, so I jump off of that, and I'm sitting there. The boat kind of corrects itself. I'm kind of like floating away, and I'm trying to get my head count, but I can't quite see everywhere because, the sea state's kind of going up and down. And I had one of the like horseshoe collars that pops whenever you get in water. So I'm like trying to use that and just kind of like bob my head up to see if I could see everybody and try to get head counts. And then all of a sudden I start hearing like yelling, like, hey, there's a guy stuck under the boat. It's like, shit. Pull out my dive knife. I cut off my flotation device and just start in a dead sprint towards the boat. So I get to the boat or whatever, and one of my good buddies, a SEAL named Tony, who had met, and we were kind of like roommates throughout that JCET, and we became pretty close friends. I'm actually going to go see him this weekend. But yeah, so we get down there or whatever, and one of the Brian Batter, one of the chiefs that was the guy that was on top of the rail, had jumped off. So we kind of like converge on the boat, and this guy, he basically, what had happened was the propeller. So we didn't know this. So the rib was it's like some sort of weird off thing, and I guess NSW bought it because it was cheaper than the one that was told to buy.
Okay.
Yeah, and apparently this one didn't have prop guards and it didn't have a kill switch. So the props were still spinning when we all went in the water, and it didn't have a prop guard. It ended up grabbing the guy's foot and it kind of chopped up his leg. And when we got him out of the water, you could see he's clearly missing everything. It was just like from his knee to his hip was femur. So it was completely gone. What had happened was like I said, it chopped up, basically degloved all the meat from his femur. And then it kind of worked its way up. It like chopped into his stomach or whatever, and it pulled his intestines into it. And then like the prop literally was resting inside of his pelvis. So we were like underwater doing like breath holds, trying to like cut him out of that to try to like get him out. We get him out, and man, there was zero blood. So I mean, I knew the guy had completely bled out by the time we got him out. He'd been underwater probably for about 3 or 4 minutes maybe. So I mean, I knew that he was gone. But we got everybody up. So like they were kind of like already working on him, get everybody up. So I made sure I got our head counts, and then I just was like kind of almost reverted back to some training stuff that I saw, because people drown during ITC, and like the first thing they do is they have everybody get out of the water and look at the wall. So and that was one thing that stuck, because I actually did drown too during ITC one time. It was like shallow water blackout. But yeah, so that was the first thing. I was like, hey, everybody face outboard. So I had everyone look outboard. So like I got everyone up, everyone was out, face outboard. So we started working on him, and it was just kind of like we all kind of were looking at each other like, this dude's expired. He's gone. He's like, but hey, just keep chest compressions. We're gonna do this to show that we actually care and that we did everything we could. So we did chest compressions on him for probably about 30 or 40 minutes. We got him onto one of the bigger boats. It's a lot faster because our boat was like already becoming deflated and stuff like that, the rib. So they get him on that boat, and Tony goes with him, and he's continuing. He was the one, he'd continue chest compressions for like another like 30 minutes or so till they got him back on land or whatever, even knowing that he was gone. Yeah, so that was kind of crazy, because it was just like, man, this was a JCET. Like this wasn't supposed to be deadly. Yeah.
Supposed to be nothing. Well, not nothing, but yeah, not have the potential to be as catastrophic as obviously all the other things that we were talking about before. Just like you just talked about, right? So all the deployments that you had stacked up, everyone was significant for different reasons based upon the events. At some point you come home from your last deployment, moving out of that, and there's a potential that, hey, recognize and realize that I have seen a lot of shit. I have done a lot of different shit, because you don't have a lot of time to process and think about different things when you're in it, or just, moving through that timeline. At what point, if there was a point for you, did you realize, okay, I did go through a lot of shit, and it's important for me to recognize that. Yeah. Was there a point for you like that?
So there was, and it was one of those things that didn't really kind of come to me until it was almost at the end, and I'll get to that in a second. But so there wasn't like a whole lot of, again, to like downtime. Everything's just kind of go. I had a little bit of downtime, obviously, with the time that I was in trouble and everything like that. But I think it really all hit me at once when it was taken from me. And I guess the way I can explain that, so on the Sri Lanka deployment, I started getting like weird heart palpitations. And it was like kind of weird. And at one time there was one that like really kind of like, what the hell was that? Like, that's not right. But I was like, okay, whatever. I'll deal with that later. I think I'll deal with it when I get back. So we get back, and I start getting like weird anxiety, stuff like that, almost like thinking that something was out to get me, or something that was like, it's hard to explain. And it sounds kind of weird, almost paranoid. And then I went to go to talk to my doctors about, whatever. So I ended up getting like, I talked to our SOIDCs, and they're like, all right, well, hey, we're going to schedule, you're going to go talk to a cardiologist. We're going to go look at it. So we went, and I'm sitting there in like the cardio lab, like I think it's like on the second or third deck at Camp Pendleton. And I'm sitting there and like everyone in there is like 70, 80 years old. And I'm just sitting there. I'm like this young guy. It's like in the prime of my life. Like, yeah. So we go back in there and I'm like, they're like, hey, something's up with this. So like, well, let's take a look at it. So like they start, they do like a EKG or whatever on it. And they're like an ultrasound and they're like, huh. And they're like, you have something going on. It's like, it's asymptomatic. So it's not related to what you're seeing. It's like, I don't want to send you in for a different kind of scan. And I was like, okay, cool, whatever. Let's just figure out what this is so I can, be on my way and get going. Yeah. So they send me to another one. So I come back again. It's probably like a week later or something like that. And I go through, they're doing the scan or whatever. And they're like, yep, it's like, you have an aortic aneurysm. And I'm like, what's that mean? And they're like, yeah, it's like, yeah, you've got, explain to me that, I've got an enlarged, vein or whatever. And it's just, it's pretty big and, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, well, cool. Let's throw like a stent or something in that thing. Let's go. Like, just like ready to go.
What's the Band-Aid that gets pulled out for this?
Yeah. So, and the guy was like, or the cardiologist was like, no, he's like, I don't think you understand. He's like, you're done. I'm like, done with what? I just got here, and you're just like, no, you're done. Like, this is the end of your career. Like I'm putting in your medical retirement paperwork. Yeah. So I was a little dumbfounded by it. I'm like, well, what do you mean? Like, why can't I can't stay in? He's like, no, he's like, you can't deploy to any kind of austere environments. You can't do combatives. You can't, you need to decondition yourself. He's like, you're too fit. Like you need to like, yeah. He's like, you got to stop working out as much as you are. Like he basically was telling me all these life changes I'm having to make. And I'm just like, well, and I'm like, are you sure? And he's like, well, what was your last MOS? I was like, well, it was an 0311. He's like, it's like, dude, you're getting out. Yeah. And I'm just like, well, shit. So, it was kind of like one of those like weird, like, carpet was literally pulled out from under me. I had no clue. Yeah.
Yeah. You weren't calling any shots.
So yes, I go back and, I'm sitting in my barracks and I'm just like, well, what the hell? So then I think it was around this time, like I really started kind of reflecting on things. And, that's when I started drinking and I started drinking to deal with stuff. And it was almost like at one point it was like, I'd start drinking to feel stuff because it was almost like I was saying before, like, I don't know if it's just too dumb to comprehend or just like, because there's just so much going on in my mind that I'm not even thinking about it or never think about it or I just push it down so far. But like, I would actually start having emotions when I started drinking and then I started drinking and then I started really drinking.
To feel more emotion, to try to tap into it or try to...
I think it was a little bit of both. It was kind of like running away from it. It was kind of that. And it was just kind of like just drinking myself into a stupor because I didn't know what I was going to do. I didn't know what my next step was. Like this was what I was going to do for the rest of my life. So it was, it was really, really surreal. And then, it took some time to kind of, whatever. And then I started trying to get in touch with my cardiologist and I couldn't find him. And then finally someone was like, oh, he dropped his retirement paperwork. I'm like, well, what about my medical retirement stuff? It's like, oh, he never finished it. So like, well, what am I supposed to do? They're just like, well, you have to wait until a new cardiologist comes on and then we'll start your paperwork all over again. And I'm just like, all right, like, well, how long is that going to take? They're like, I don't know. Like just whenever we get a new cardiologist. So yeah, so I had to wait. So this put on a thing because they already put in my stuff saying that I couldn't jump anymore. I couldn't, I can't do any of the stuff that I would normally do. So it was, they already put me like in the 3 shop. So I was, just kind of hanging out in the 3 shop doing nothing and basically taking up a seat. And then that was where things started to kind of compound on itself even more because I guess in our world, everyone's a number. And I didn't think of myself as a number and I honestly didn't think my command would think of me as a number until they did. And what I mean by that was you have boat spaces. So it's like every battalion is allowed to have so many operators and those operators have to be obviously in the teams and have to be doing whatever. Well, I'm here holding a number and
somebody else they
could be deploying and I'm literally sitting in the 3 shop. So they needed to get rid of me. So they were just like, why aren't you gone? Like, why aren't you gone? I'm like, I don't know. I'm in this weird limbo. I've never done this before. Like, I don't have a cardiologist. They told me that I can't do this. I can't do that anymore. Like I'm and now I'm here and now you want me to leave. So that really compounded on it because now, you now know that you're just nothing but like you're replaceable. You're 100% replaceable. You're just a number, the Marine Corps. And again, too, it's, it's a realization because Marine Corps doesn't need you. They're going to move on and not like in a bad way, but it's just like, like they're just going to move on. Like, it's, yeah.
As that.
Yeah.
As that.
So, and it, again, too, it was like a realization that I wasn't going to do it anymore. And it was all I ever wanted to do, and then now the people that, I thought, valued me or whatever, are just like, hey, you got to go. Like, like, what do you do?
It was like abandon it.
Yeah.
Now I would imagine like that. I imagine it feels like, because what you're describing to me as I'm listening to it, that's the first thing I think of is like, my family is abandoning me.
Yeah.
I'm stuck here to figure it out on my own.
Yeah. So that goes on for like almost 3 months. It was something ridiculous before we finally got a new cardiologist. And when we get a new cardiologist, like, hey, your cardiologist is here. She wants to see you. I'm like, oh, cool. Like, let's go do this. Let's figure this out. So I go in there and she's like looking at my paperwork and stuff like that. She's like, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. And like, all of a sudden my hopes are kind of coming up. And I'm like, what? And she's like, yeah. She's like, no. She's like, you're not going to get retired. Like, this is stupid. Like, you don't need to be retired. Like, you're going to be fine. And I'm like, awesome. I'm like, well, hey, I'm on a jump waiver right now. I need to go jump so I can get my jump pay because they're about to dock me. I think at that point, because I just got back from the Sri Lanka deployment. So I think I only got like a couple of jumps in because somehow they finagled that. But yeah, so I'm like, all right, hey, I think I needed like 3 jumps to be back to current so they wouldn't dock me like almost, I think it was like $1,500 or something stupid like that. And she was like, whoa, what? She's like, jump. I'm like, yeah, like I got to go jump. She's like, no, you can't do that. I'm like, wait, what do you mean I can't do that? She's like, no, you're done with that. Like you can't jump anymore. And I'm like, well, yes. Now at this point, I'm starting to get confused and I'm actually like, got my hopes up just to like, yeah, drop them back down. She's like, well, you can't do that. I'm like, well, what do you mean I can't do it? Well, what can I do? And then she's like, well, what do you do? And I explained to her, it's like, oh, hey, I've got to do this, I've got to do, rucks. She's like, no, you can't do that. No, you can't do that. And I'm just like, well, what can I do? She's like, well, you can sit behind a desk.
Yes, right.
And I'm like, no, like, that's not even an option. Like, yeah. And I was just like, I think I got a little angry, obviously, just because of like the way that she like picked me up and then dropped me back down like that. And I was just like, okay, cool. I'm like, I want to talk to a cardiologist. And she was like, excuse me? So she took it offense. Like she went like full on ballistic, like offensive. And she was just like, yeah, I'm like, well, I need to talk, like this is BS. Like I can't stay in, like I can't do this. And she was just like, well, she's like, you can either stay in until you get like forced out because of your rank. Because I couldn't go to PFT or CFT, which is like literally, you can't go to PME schools. You cannot progress.
You're stuck.
Yeah. So it was literally, I was just going to sit behind a desk until they forced me out because I wasn't picking up gunny. I basically made like a stink of that. And then she got all like really upset. And she was just like, she's like, all right, cool. She's like, I'm going to torpedo your retirement. Like just straight up said that. And I'm like, okay, whatever. Like I want a second opinion. And she's like, so she gave me that thing. I went down to Balboa and I talked to another cardiologist who was down there and he actually worked with SOCOM. So, he was with the SEAL teams and stuff like that. So he actually understood what we do and what we, and he's like, no, he's like, this is BS. And, I told him everything she did, everything she said. And he's like, go wait out in the hall. I'm like, so I go out and kind of go back down the hall or whatever. And you hear him just yelling. He is like, he calls up the other cardiologist and he is just ripping her a new one. And, so they go on this like little thing or whatever. And it's like probably 20 minutes goes by. He calls me back in there and he's like, hey man, he's like, this is absolute BS. Like what she's doing is absolute BS. He's like, I will retire you if you can get her to transfer because that's the only way you can do it is she has to release you as a patient. But she refused to release me as a patient because she knew.
Point.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sure. The last point there.
Yeah. Yeah. So I basically got med-sepped. So I got med-sepped with a 0 rating for my heart. But because when the SOCOM Care Coalition advocates went through all my medical stuff, they were like, ooh, yeah, you're well past 100%, like just looking at all my stuff.
Yeah.
So I got 100% total and permanent through the VA, but I was 0% for my heart condition, which literally was the one thing that obviously caused me to spiral even further down because now, again, it gets to a point where they're holding up my stuff. I'm having to now fight like the legal system about all this stuff. And I had to go to a med board and all this other thing. Yeah. So it just turned into like this process, long drawn out process. And every single day, like, you know, the command's getting pissed at me because I'm still there. I just want to go home and see my wife. Cause at this point, like I was already married, but my wife was living here in Quantico or Stafford rather. And I was, you know, back in California, you know, so kind of alone, kind of doing my own thing, hanging out with guys in the barracks, but like, you know, just drinking, just sitting there drinking and just self-destructing. When it got to the breaking point, I started realizing, or just kind of started like, it's like, hey, something's got to give. I'm drinking way too much. I'm like, I can't do this. Like, and I can't go back like this. And, you know, I was having like really bad suicidal ideations and just, I needed something. And I knew that the route that I was going on with drinking and with everything that I'd been through and, you know, everything that I was currently going through, like I couldn't do it anymore. I needed help. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I went to the command and was like, you know, I told them like, hey, like, I don't know how to say this. It's like, but I've got a drinking problem and I need to figure this out. I can't go home like this. And, they were like, oh, you got another thing that's going to keep you here longer. And I'm like, no, like I'm coming to you like earnestly, like,
are you serious?
Yeah. Like this is serious.
It took a lot of thought and effort.
Yeah.
To get the courage to come to you, to bring this to you.
Yeah.
And this is the response.
Yeah. So I'm just like, yeah. So it completely doubled down on like their hatred for me or something. So like it got to a point where like, they were like, well, hey, how did it work? So this is how it went. So we were coming up on Thanksgiving, like this Thanksgiving, like 96 or whatever. So I'd had my leave in and everything like that. And I remember, you know, they were basically telling me that I was lying about it and all this other stuff. And they were like, yeah, hey, if you just admit that you were lying about it, then I see that you got paperwork to go home. Like you'll be able to go home. Just tell me that you're lying about it. Walk out of here now. And I'm like, no, like I legitimately need help. And they're like, all right, I'm going to ask you one more time. Like, you know, if you don't deny this or you say that you're doing this, like, I know you're lying. It's like, we're going to go down a different route. And I'm like, no, like, I'm telling you right now, like, I need help. So they basically like sent me out or whatever. I go talk to they sent me down to medical and I'm talking to my senior chief and I'm explaining stuff to him. He was actually the senior chief that was with us on the one JCET. Yeah, Sri Lanka. And actually, I think he may have even been with us in 2012. So he's like, you know, he knows me and he's like really cool with me and everything. And he's like, hey, man, like, dude, he's like, I was telling him everything about how much I was drinking or stuff. He's like, look, man, he's like, if you're drinking that much, he's like, you can't just stop. He's like, it's going to be more dangerous. So I'm not going to tell you to stop. He's like, but please, he's like, just slow it down. Like, don't drink as much. Just slow it down. So you need to start figuring out how to taper off. You know, so he's like, you know, don't quite do what you normally do, right, like based off what you were telling me. He's like, but you can't just stop. So, and I remember too, actually, this was the Trump election. So it was election night. So I'm sitting down there, we're like in the common area of the barracks and, you know, I'm just like drinking and doing my normal routine. Trump wins or whatever. I go upstairs, go to bed. I get up that next morning or whatever and I go to the office or whatever. I'm just sitting there like just doing my work or whatever. And I think it was the acting CO and someone else and senior chief come in there and they're like, hey, it's like, we need to talk to you. I'm like coming out there and they're like talking to me, but they're like in my face, you know, and I'm just like, why does it seem like this is weird?
Right.
And then they're like, all right, it's like, we're going to take you. They're like, are you drunk right now? And I was like, no. Like, so they basically were giving me like a field sobriety test and like, cool, let's take you down over here. We're going to get you tested, like blood tested. Cause they started testing me. So, you know, past all the field sobriety tests, they go down to the thing and like, yeah, I had alcohol in my system, like, cause the night before.
Yeah.
But like, I was like, at that point, like it was just, what's the word? I guess functioning alcoholic. Like I
don't realize
I could function, I could do whatever, but I still had alcohol in my system. So now they're like, all right, well, you know, we're going to charge you.
Now you're at work.
Yeah. Yeah. So senior chief, like when he was driving me to get my blood test, he was just like, this is so much bullshit. And I could kind of feel like something was up, but he wasn't quite telling me, but he was kind of telling me. And, you know, so, you know, obviously they showed that or whatever. And they're like, well, you were just drinking before work and all this other stuff. And I'm like, no, like this is, you know, like, what do you want me to do? And they're like, well, again, they came at me like, you need to tell me that you're just lying about this. I'm like, I'm not lying about it. It's like, all right, cool. It's like, well, He's like, basically was like, he's like, we can do this one of two ways. He's like, either A, you can tell me that you're lying, you can go on leave, we'll drop it. You can say that you're not lying. He's like, I'm going to have you tested. And then when you get tested or whatever, then I'm going to get you from lingering. And I'm like, fine, test me. So they had already tested my stuff or whatever. They started doing like the rest of my blood work up, and like immediately they started breaking out the banana bags. And I was like, I didn't really know what that meant, but it was just like, yeah, no, we're checking you into rehab. Like, yeah, that was it. Like they checked me into inpatient rehab that day. Yeah. So so basically that started my detox. So wasn't expecting to. So I literally spent the Thanksgiving '96 in detox, just sitting by myself in the ward or whatever. I remember, I was pretty miserable. Just going through detox, but it was just like kind of one of those things. I remember they were coming in, and every now and then they give me like pain medicine or whatever, and they're just like, "You're the quietest like person that's ever been." And I'm just like, dude, suffer in silence. Like, no one wants to hear your shit. Like, why would anyone care? Like, so I think that I feel like it kind of resonated. They're just like, holy shit. It's like, oh, okay. So they would just kind of come in every now and then. They give me like my morphine, and I would just sit there. But
well, do you think that made us more like concerned with your just mental state, the fact that you were just like, it's whatever.
It could have. And I mean, and in all honesty, I mean, that whole thing was a blur. Like, I don't remember a whole lot of it. I do remember though, I did have one visitor, and like, even to this day, I was super thankful for that, because, sitting there and through Thanksgiving holiday, like, you don't have a phone, you can't call anyone, like, you're completely away from your family, and you've got no one there, like no support, no nothing. Like, you're there because your command put you there. And like, that was the one person you thought you had your back, and you're just sitting there by yourself, but I had, they came in like, hey, you got a visitor. Do you want a visitor right now? And I was just kind of like, a visitor? Like, you can come visit me. And he was also one of the guys that went to bat for me, because of the fact that like, they were trying to tell me, that was one of the other things. They tried to tell me that I was faking my heart injury. But like, at one point in time, they had me on this like little mobile like heart system. And every time I was getting like weird palpitations and all this other stuff, or I started having like an arrhythmia or something like that, like my stuff would start setting up alarms. Kurt was like, no, he's like, he's not faking this. Like, I sit next to him in the office. Like, I hear his stuff going off. Like he's not faking it. Like, I know this guy, and again too, like he was good enough to like literally, he had his family and everything like that, his daughter, he had, enough decency to just like come and just check on me. So he came and sat with me for a little while. We just kind of talked and, hung out and stuff. And yeah, I appreciate that visit more than he probably knows. Then I got out of that, and then I had to start the, was it the SAP program or whatever, the alcohol substance abuse program. So I started that, and that was pretty good. It was a lot of like therapies and classes and stuff like that. And they explained to you about like, all this liquor and stuff like that. And, we had your one-on-one times for like therapy and stuff like that. And while I was there though, somebody mentioned something about because it's right next to the Wounded Warrior Battalion, and somebody had mentioned something about like wood stuff, and like somebody showed me like a little pen that they had turned or something like that. And I was like, well, that's kind of cool. I like playing with wood. Yeah. So I was just like, I'll go check it out. So I walked down there and was just like, talking to the guys that was there. It's put on by TAV. It's the Turning Around for Vets. So that's the name of the program, and it was put on. So that's the name of the program, and it was put on by the San Diego Woodworkers Guild. And those dudes were really, really, really cool, man. They're just like a bunch of like old guys that just like love like turning and playing with wood and stuff like that. And yeah, it was all set up, man. You had like all these lathes, you had all the tools. And they would teach you how to use everything. They taught you how to sharpen everything, and they supplied all the wood. They supplied all the blanks. You just had to be there. And I started getting really, really deep into it. It was super, super cathartic. It helped me a lot. And there was a couple of things that kind of, that really helped me along the way. And like, the guys from TAV were a big part of that. So, I started doing bowls and stuff like that, and they were like super supportive of everything I was doing, even to a point where they're like, I was talking to one guy, I came to his house like after the thing one day, because, they only did it like I think once or twice a week. And I had some stuff that I wanted to do really bad, and he was wanting to play, because he saw that I started playing with resin. I started filling some of the wood with resin and doing like these bowls and pens and stuff with resin. And he was kind of curious about it. So he invited me over, and I was like working with him on his like lathes, and we were like playing around with stuff. And he was like, well, he's like, man, he's like, what kind of lathe do you have at home? And I'm like, I don't have a lathe. And he's like, you don't wood turn? And I'm like, well, I mean, I do it here.
Sure.
And he's like, okay. So, you know, didn't think anything of it or whatever. And dude, sure enough, man, he came with like a bunch of extra tools and stuff that he gave me. And he, him and one of the other guys, they set me up with a donor. There was a guy that like donates and does like, you know, stuff like that. And they basically donated me a Delta MIDI lathe. So they hooked it up and they sent it to my my house that my wife was living at the time. Or still was their house. Yeah. So they sent me a lathe and everything like that. So I could continue doing it once I got out. So, which was like awesome, you know, and then, you know, so that was a really big help. And that was like, you know, very cathartic. Like I said, it was very cathartic. It was very like soothing to me. And they just kind of like, you know, I'd spent a lot of my time, I guess, destroying stuff, you know, whether it's like myself or, yeah, that it was kind of cool to like start creating stuff. So that was super cool.
So is that, so I said TAV in general, right? You know, not only just through the wood turning and the woodworking stuff, but the people, obviously they're trying to help you process through things like that. How about anybody in your family, you know, Jackie or somebody else that you kind of turned to, you know, as you were going through this process of saying, okay, hey, I need you to be here for me, and this is what it looks like.
Oh yeah, yeah. So there was actually, obviously my wife Jackie was a really big one. You know, and she was super, like, she was on it like a champ. Like, you know, she didn't miss a beat. And then one of the other programs that we found that was really, really cool that my buddy Jake Cervantes turned me on to was Operation Healing Forces, which is like it's like a group of donors and stuff like that, and they basically put on these full on like retreats for family members and stuff, I guess. And the way it was started literally was like the founder, Mr. Markel, was like hanging out, and I guess he was watching these documentaries and stuff, I guess, about like SOCOM guys and how like SOCOM guys have like, because I mean, obviously, you know, like suicide rates and like divorce rates and all this stuff are like super, super high among the military, but they're like double.
Yeah, spread it out. Spread it out. It's like,
And again, too, I mean, I was one of those statistics, you know, I was having, you know, I was going through like the issues with like suicidal ideations. I was going through, you know, I went through like a divorce, and it was particularly a nasty one at the time, you know, because there's kids involved. Every time there's kids involved, you know, it was just like, I'm never going to see my kids again. You know, she moved back to Georgia, and I'm still at California, and, you know, I don't have the money. I don't have the means or the time to get out. That was one of the cool things too. Like I was saying with like the retreats and stuff that OHF, puts on, was like, they basically brought us together, and then they make you do like team building exercises and stuff like ropes courses. And like, you go like, you know, we traversed the Rockies on horseback and like stuff like that. Yeah. So it was like really, really, really cool. And it's like put in this like laid back, it's not like one of those like corny, like almost like you would do with TLD where you're like forced into like these group therapy things and stuff like that. It's just like, oh, this is stupid or lame. It's like everything is optional. And like, you know, you go through these things, and it was really, really cool to just like connect with my wife again like that. And especially since we had that distance between us and stuff like that, you know, and I think it gave me a lot of confidence in the fact that it's like, hey, she's going to be here for me. She's there through thick and thin.
All right. Having somebody that you know, for you earlier you were talking about like your teammates, right? The people that you were in the shit with. You're like, hey, I feel almost invincible. I feel invincible because of the people that are around me, right? It's like that, just that joint invincible thing that it gives you. So, but the opposite end of that at home, or not the opposite end, but the other part of that is at home, having somebody like that in your corner.
Yeah.
It almost helps you. And I know for me, and I'm speaking from my own personal thing, but for me, it helped me kind of let my guard down a little bit and be like, okay, I am kind of not messed up, but there are some things that I need to work through.
Yeah.
And the people around you that love you, that like give you the space to work through that, right? Yeah. And because it looks different from day to day on the healing process and all the different things that you're going through. So, you know, so obviously you talked about the woodworking stuff, you know, you hit the pens, and you talked about the bowls, but has that been outside of the Marine Corps, after you've transitioned and you've moved into this stage of your life, has that been the biggest thing for you in terms of finding relaxation, finding peace, or is there more to that?
So, I mean, yeah, I think again, too, like I said, just rebuilding and having an actual family life, I think was a big one. We had my daughter, so I've got my daughter, and my boys they're older now, but they can actually drive themselves up to see me. So that kind of helps, I think, a lot, kind of keep me even keel, like the just kind of leaning back into or leaning up against like the family life and being a family man, which it's definitely nice. And it's been helpful, and then obviously, like you said, like we had, the wood turning stuff, that was also a big help. And I don't do it as often as I'd like to, just because I'm so busy. But I mean, I still get on it every once in a while. Like I was showing you that wood smoker that, it's just like, hey, I want to get back in on this.
Yeah.
But it's been pretty instrumental in helping me. And then like also, again, too, like with Operation Healing Forces, and then being able to like, I've actually gone through and like spoke at some of their events and stuff like that to try to see if they could help get donors to help other people that were going through the same thing that I have. And, and in a lot of ways, I guess too, like there was like, it almost got like a new lease on life as far as like purpose, cause when my purpose was taken from me, when I was basically forced to, when I got separated and I didn't have one, and I was just kind of wandering aimlessly, but it's like, I think God definitely has a plan for everything and everyone. And I think that, you'll never, like, I'll never ever doubt that there's a God. There's the amount of stuff that I went through and survived. And like, again, too, like one of the ongoing jokes was with me on like rooftops. Like, it wasn't just that one day, but it was like every time I ever got on a roof when we were in Afghanistan, I got shot at.
There.
Yeah, it was almost like 100% chance. And, and there's been times where like literally rounds, it's like I'm just like walking across the thing to like fix antennas or something like that in the middle of broad daylight, and I feel like the heat or the vapor trail or whatever just like whizzing by my nose, and I'm just like, okay, gonna lay down now, but yeah, there's a reason that I'm still here today, and I'm still figuring that out. But I mean, it gives me something to look forward to and something to kind of look forward, so.
So no, I appreciate you coming out and sharing your life. I mean, you shared your life story. I mean, no, it's not everything, right? But a lot of it. And the fact that those events that you've shared with us was what shaped you, a lot of who you are today. So, the last thing I kind of want to hit on is, no doubt when you went and asked for help, right, because of the alcohol and then that specific point in your life, I can't imagine how hard that was, and how much courage you had to get up to say, "Hey, I have an issue, I have a problem, I need help." So, the context and the idea of Cook Heal Connect and all these different things that we're doing is, hey, let's make a meal together. Let's talk about this, and let's sit down and enjoy the meal, and let's talk about the healing portion, right? Let's talk about how somebody went through different challenges or trauma or issues in their life, whatever the case may be, and how they came out of it on the other end. And the hope is there's people that watch any of these videos and they key in on maybe a 10-minute part of something you said, and they're like, I feel everything that Ryan had just said right there, listening to that part of his story, maybe even the whole story. So the last thing I would kind of hit on is, what would you say to people that are on the fence of, I think I need help, but I'm too scared, or I don't know what the first step should be? What would you say to those people?
I say, honestly, the first thing is just, it's saying it out loud, or knowing that you need it, and then verbally, acting on that. And then again, too, so like you have that. So that's the first big step, and it may be kind of a small step, but then the next one is finding help. And I think, a lot of times it's not something that that we do, or something that's like ingrained in us, because it's like you don't really ask for help. But in all honesty, I mean, if I hadn't, I mean, granted, in my case, probably wouldn't be the same case everyone else has. So I mean, it's kind of like almost bad to say. It's like, hey, I asked for help, and it's like, oh, look what happened to him when he asked for help. But not every case is like that. I think mine was an oddly specific case. It's kind of an outlier, but there's resources out there, there's things out there, and I mean, you just kind of have to find it. You have to know, you have to find a purpose. And for those that may not see or may not know what their purpose is, the biggest thing I think, and I'm kind of at a loss for that question, but I mean, like, or how to answer that question, but like, yeah, I think the biggest first step is just asking for help, and there's resources out there, whether you're a vet, there's definitely resources for vets. And it's just a matter of reaching out and then finding, someone that's suitable or someone that you can talk to that's like that, and you're reaching out, maybe it's not even to a professional, it's just to a friend, and that's one of the things that's been, plaguing our community too, that you remember that right before the Marine Corps ball, we ended up burying another one of my friends, and he was like the third friend I had, that took his life, in like as many months. So, and it's just, it's a rough thing to deal with, and it's a rough thing to do. And again too, it's not just in the military. And it was, one of the things I didn't really talk about, but I mean, my adopted brother killed himself when I believe he was like 24. So it was like 20, it was actually the night that I had that near fatal car accident. So yeah, so that was a really, really, really rough one. But I mean, so I mean, I wouldn't know how to go about it from like the civilian aspect as far as how to ask, other than just finding a friend. I mean, just pick up the phone, call a friend.
Someone, yeah.
Yeah, so, and vets. I mean, we have the VA, we have all this stuff, and maybe it's not what it's supposed to be or whatever. But the one thing that I know that you can rely on is your brothers in arms. And I mean, even coming from some of the situations I had with some of my command, that was with some of them, like my other brothers, like, Brian Jacklin, Ricky Briere, like any of those dudes, like Fees, like I could call those guys up at any point in time and they'd be there, and I feel like I do the same for you, or do the same if I called to you. But, it's the biggest thing is just reaching out, knowing that you're not alone, and it doesn't make you weak because you've got, something, or something's weighing heavy on your heart, or you're, going through something, just, it doesn't make you any less of a man. It doesn't make you weak. It just, everyone falters.
Just need help.
Everyone. Yeah.
Yeah. Just need help. And the two things that you mentioned, two groups that you mentioned, TAV and Operation Healing Forces, have not heard of them before, but I'll definitely link them in the show notes, when this gets published, because I think there's so many resources out there that people just don't know. Right. And
yeah,
there's two more.
Yeah.
There's two more that I didn't know of, so I'll put those in the show notes. I appreciate you bringing that up, and making that part of your story. So, thank you. Plain and simple, man. The vulnerability, the willingness to come on here, share your story with however many people end up watching this, when this gets published, or 2-3 years down the road. So, thanks, bro.
Yeah. Appreciate thank you.
Yeah, appreciate it. All right, guys. So that's it for episode 2 for Cook Heal Connect. We had a little bit of a break over the last couple of months with the holidays, and just reflecting and trying to, make the production of this stand out and be a little bit better. And actually, our guest today, Ryan, was a huge help in, kind of guiding me in terms of, filmography and videography and things of that nature and all those things. So more to follow. Next episode coming out soon. See you guys next time.